Resources. Oh, good. From Insight Resources holds that retention increases by 29 to 42% through visuals. So let's get under the hood about how we incorporate visuals into our thinking. Just a second. The notification that we're being recorded stopped everything. So first you look at something. And for whatever reason, you look at it for a moment and maybe you look away just as quickly. Or maybe you take time to really see it. Register it in your brain. Collect everything you can from that image. Apples aren't just shiny and red with a stem sticking out the top. There are lots of colors, from whites to deep, 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 almost black reds. Its shapes and sizes vary, and that's just one apple. So if we're really seeing something, we see the real apple instead of the one in our minds. If your imagination takes you somewhere else, you may want to render that idea. Do it quickly at first, just to capture the basics of the idea. You can come back later. You can give it some more thought, or you may dump it. And you may do that many times, but that's okay, because it's temporary. Temporary work is not meant to last, which is precisely the value of sketching. It's the kernel of an idea. You can capture it quickly, move on to the next thing, and later, when the idea frenzy is over, you begin to really consider those ideas. You keep the good stuff, you wad up, delete, or erase the rest, until you find something that needs to get some traction. So how do you get traction? One way is to create immediacy. If you could shorten the time between having an idea in some abstract sense and how it might be represented visually, if you could shorten that time, the next is to build momentum. Show you understand an objective or a problem, or you have an idea for a solution, then get validation or course correction to ensure that understanding. And the last is to generate interest. Even if people who aren't interested will stop and pay attention when you start sketching something, which in turn adds visibility to an idea. The public aspect of whiteboarding or sharing sketches online helps your ideas be seen. You're also putting yourself out there, which can be a little scary. And standing up in front of a whiteboard is hard. Taking over the Miro board when people around the world are watching is hard. But by being there, you're communicating dedication to solving a problem, even if it's only temporary. There are other advantages I mentioned to the quickness of rendering sketches. First of all, it makes it possible to make certain decisions quickly. Since it's temporary, it's cost effective because you didn't spend a lot of time generating stuff in Figma or Sketch and going back and forth for approvals for every idea. Do we move on with this? Do we scrap it? If we scrap it, no harm done. It's just a sketch. And when I say disarming, I'm talking about how sketching feels personal when you do it. And that comes across to others, especially clients who feel like, wow, they made this for me. Intelligent people may disagree, but I think there's something about the handmade that a Miro or a mural board with its infinite-ishness, there's a little bit of showbiz in this, and that's okay, as long as there's substance to it. Do not do it for the sake of doing it when something else makes more sense. That's what my friend Spider Girl perfectly calls UX theater, which means, as we say in Texas, cowboy over there is all hat, no cattle. So you remember what I said about visuals kicking up retention 29 to 42%? Well, no matter where you are in the world of design or anything else, your job is to create understanding. It sounds simple, but it can be rugged as hell. I'm going to show you how I created understanding at different times. And while you look at this stuff, I want you to see two things. First, none of it is especially super clean or polished. And second, I want you to imagine trying to verbally explain any of these concepts to someone else on a phone, face-to-face on a screen, or face-to-face in person. So let's start simple. Lists. When a group is brainstorming or information dumping and listing all the things, get up and start to write the list on the whiteboard if you're there in person or in a virtual space. You have the capability there to clarify concepts in ways that people will remember. Now, you may not remember this list, but you're likely to remember the image. Up to 42% more likely. And there are more things you can do. When I returned from Sydney in the before times, I came to work the next day with a case of Tim Tams. Now, I know you can get them here, but they're not the same. They're the most awesome cream-filled cookie chocolate covered things, and there's gobs and gobs of flavors over in Australia that they don't have here. And I learned about something called the Tim Tam Slam, and I wanted to share it with my fellow Rocketeers. So I made an infographic. Now, the difference between an infographic and a pretty picture is how it's informed. Everything here is supported by data, hence the term infographic. And if anybody has been in that situation where they didn't care so much about the research going into your artifacts, whether it's journey map or a persona or anything like that, that's a pretty picture. From a note-taking perspective, mind maps are a great nonlinear way to catch conversation and follow all the tangents. People can see that they're getting further away from the topic, the further away from the center of the mind map they get. The important thing is, even if you use the whiteboard just to take your notes, you're creating a new dynamic. By writing the notes, you're basically writing for everyone. And because you probably can't write everything everyone says as they say it, you have to summarize. Now you're in a position to get the consensus around an idea. And when you can do that, your notes become the notes, and there's less of a chance that people will switch positions later. How easy is it to remember a flowchart? They mostly look like the same furniture, boxes and connectors and annotations and teeny tiny text. And every time you see another, they just rearrange the furniture. You could probably figure out this diagram all by yourself in a few minutes. How long would these stories take to write out and to read? And by stories, I mean, this one little chart maps out 4 different stories. So now how long would it take to explain it? Oops. There we go. So this may be a jump, but I've used whiteboard photos and sketches to populate working prototypes. And I've used several tools, InVision, Adobe or XD, or like this one, which is in Flinto. Choose your weapon. You can also mix and match. If I keep looking to the left, it's because that's where my screens are. So whatever you think will achieve the level of understanding you need people to have. Mash up all you like. This is lists and flows and infographic and, you know, whatever makes the most sense in the moments that you're in, because no 2 projects are the same. And it's not uncommon for me to create a new artifact based on what the situation demands. Now, having control of the board gives you power. And what you do with that power is up to you. Some of you will never take to the sketching bit, and that's okay. You're not limited to drawings. Everybody asks, what tools did you use? And now they might really like what they're seeing and be truly interested. They might also be design snobs, and they're looking for some reason to be condescending. Oh, Figma. I tried that out. I suppose it's okay. But I've been using the Adobe suite for years and haven't seen anything to rival it. Has everybody met that person? Especially online. Or they might think the tool is what makes you creative, and they're looking for a recipe. There isn't one, you know. So regardless of how you finish a design or a document, you start with the most freakishly amazing apparatus since the dawn of personkind. Yep. Oh, yep. That one's out of the bag. So it doesn't matter what your preferred medium is, but your brain and good hand and practice are the things that make the difference. Okay. So whether you like a pencil or a fancy pen or a whiteboard marker, an iPad or a stylus, or even a blade crayon on the back of an envelope, they're just tools. You select them according to their function and your comfort using it. A hammer is an awesome tool, unless you need to cut a board. A tool doesn't give you talent, it doesn't give you creativity. Your imagination and how you use a tool does that. But the folks who are looking for a recipe think that maybe that's where the magic lies. So as I said, just about anything that makes a mark, just about anything that makes a mark that you can mostly control will work. Maybe a pencil is all you'll ever need. The more comfortable you get with sketching, the more likely you are to want to up your game a bit. Tablet is still just a tool. You see my sketching all through this deck, and my hand skills aren't going to blow anyone's hair back, but it doesn't need to. I want to get better at using my iPad, and even though I'm a passable sketcher, I'm not yet comfortable with this particular tool, so I'm practicing. That is true doodling. I mean, I was just trying out brushes, so there's no reason there. So this may become useful for some things, but I doubt that I'll completely forsake my favorite stainless steel fine point Sharpies and non-acetate bright white paper for it. But it's another tool in the box. So all of this is really just to make one particular point. And the point is, it's not your drawing skill that matters. It's what you communicate with it. Aesthetics alone don't create understanding. Your amazingly incomprehensibly complex brain does. So here are some resources that informed and influenced this deck. And you may be familiar with some of them. Back of the Napkin by Dan Rome is subtitled Solving Problems and Selling Ideas with Pictures. The notion of the napkin sketch is now part of the international zeitgeist. The next one is Pencil Me In by Christina Woodkey, who is pretty well known in the UX space, and she's written a lot of books on a lot of things. But this is about an exploration she made into learning to sketch and the value of it, just like you're doing today. And you'll get this deck in the notes, so the links are in there too if you want to track these down. The next one is Visual Thinking and Sketch Notes. It's a Medium article done in graphics by Dave Gray, who is an unofficial mentor of mine. He's a good friend, but I've gotten so many things from him in his written works, in seminars, in Medium articles like this. His fingerprints are all over this deck. But as far as sketching, creativity, ideas, games that create understanding, business philosophy, human understanding, he is a Renaissance guy. And the last one, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. It's both ubiquitous and more than a sum of its parts. Now, ostensibly, he shows you different techniques for rendering meaning into your sketches, when in fact, he's giving a masterclass on observing and communicating the human condition. I I've been a fanboy of his for a long time. This is the book. If you don't get any others, get this one. A few years ago at the big design conference, it took me a couple of years, but I was able to bring him in as the keynote. And when so he's kind of my hero. I don't fanboy much, but when he showed up, he let me know he'd arrived at the hotel, and I went down to visit him. And first thing he says, I haven't eaten anything. He said, okay, if we grab a bite? I said, sure. He said, you want to join me? I said, yeah. And inside I'm going, oh my God. So we sat, we visited. It turns out we have some mutual acquaintances. It was just kind of a nice visit. And right away I saw something different. Every time there were a few folks who walked up, we were kind of off to one side, who walked up, saw who he was, and they wanted to visit him, shake his hand. And he took the time for everybody that approached him. They we're just saying hi, and you've seen people who were kind of used to that, and they're like, yeah, good to see you. But as the event went on, I saw that was not the case. Everybody he spoke to, and everybody who wanted a little piece of his time, got it. And he wasn't just staring and nodding. He was present. He was there. And so I'm getting this idea that, okay, so this guy's already a hero of mine. And you meet your heroes sometimes, and they turn out to be jerks. And this guy was the exact opposite. He was everything, you would hope a hero would be like. And through since I was kind of his aide, walking around with him, which didn't bother me much, there were just a lot of times when a little extra might have been not necessary, but people would ask, and he was totally obliging. For instance, when he finished his keynote, we had ladies that sold books out in the lobby, and they asked, would he be willing to sign some books? We've got several of them. And I said, well, I don't know. We didn't arrange for that. Let me go ask him. And so we're walking up he's left the podium, and we're walking up. And I asked him, and he said, sure. So we set him up at a table, and the line went all the way down the lobby and all the way around the corner. And he sat there for 2 hours signing books, but talking to folks. Everybody who came by wanted to talk. And as I said before, he was there. He was present. He was listening and being in the conversation. And then just before the line ran out, we're down to like the last 3 people, this waifish, freakishly tall young girl walks up, and she's hugging her portfolio. And she says, I know this is an imposition, but would you mind terribly taking a look at some of my work and offering some opinions? And he said, no, I don't mind at all. Let the line get finished, and then come back over and sit down. So we got to the end of the line. The last guy, just kept trying to show what an end dude he was, and then just went on and on and on and on. And finally he finished up, and he left, and he kind of waved the young designer over, and they sat down, and he shooed everybody away. And he sat there for probably 20, 25 minutes looking at her book, pointing things out. I couldn't exactly hear what was going on, but it was a very engaged, interesting conversation. And while they were over there, I took a snap of them with my phone. And then they finished up, and she's walking away, and she's floating. And I stopped her, and I said, I took a quick picture of you over there. If you like, I'll go ahead and send it to you. And so she gave me an email address, and I flipped it over to her, and so she got to walk away with that. For the rest of the time, after party, I don't like to go to the after parties because I've kind of peopled out, but he sits down and says, you know what, I heard there's an after party, I want to go. I said, well, okay. And so we went over to the Londoner, which is, if you're from around here, it's very tight and very crowded, and there's lots of little nooks and crannies. And so I felt like I'd lurked long enough. And so I went downstairs because the party was sort of upstairs, and I was shooting pool or something. And again, everybody who wanted to speak to him got to. Everybody who wanted a little piece of him got it. And then while I'm shooting pool, I feel a hand tap me on the shoulder. I turn around, and he says, you know what? I said, what's that? He said, you don't have to talk when you shoot pool. I said, no, you don't. And so we wrapped up the night, and the next morning we're eating breakfast and he comes through and it's hugs all around. And so, we've still been in touch since. But when I know that that's the kind of person he is, and then I look through this book and I've heard him speak about these things, it has so much more impact on how I think about what I'm doing. Certainly it can help your hand skills, but it's what the book's about that makes a difference. So sorry for that digression. Now, I'd like to talk a little about facilitation. And so it's worn a lot of different ways by different people. But it's being a moderator. It's leading people toward a desired outcome in some framework. So visual facilitation is that with pictures. Because as I mentioned a few times, roughly 2 out of 3 people understand and remember more when it's visual. In March of last year, we went into lockdown. And I was told I'd be running a discovery session virtually for a large, well-known consumer brand. Now, the way I run a discovery session is the complete antithesis of virtual. Everyone's in the same room with floor-to-ceiling whiteboards and flip chart paper covering up all the things I've prepped for the next couple of days. And it's tactile, it's fast-paced, it's organic. And there's a dynamic that cannot be duplicated on a laptop screen. All the benefits I spoke about at the beginning of the presentation, those are out the window. So it was like learning how to walk again, except I had 3 days. At least that's what I thought at the time. It turned out that I wasn't expected to pivot on a dime without support. I had help from some really smart folks that I worked with, and they'd spent a lot of time actually in the lead up to the lockdown experimenting with ways to do exactly this. Now, it still fell to me to do the research, to know everything I could about the client and their project before the session. And then I had to plan how to run the exercises in some way that would deliver substance. And when we presented our ideas, so that when we presented our ideas about a week later. Oh, get ahead. Now, some of my greatest fears were valid. We did give up a lot of the benefits of proximity. You lose the ability to read a room. You have no way to keep anyone from answering email, texting, or doing anything else they want to. And there were other shortcomings as well, but that's not the point. The point is that I learned that by trying to duplicate what I do in the meet space, I was making it harder. But by suspending disbelief and looking at what our tools let us do instead of what they wouldn't, I discovered alternatives that took advantage of the media's strength. So for starters, on Zoom, everybody can't talk at once, which made giving and getting information much easier. There's also an egalitarian dynamic on the screen or working in a virtual collaboration board. People can do things simultaneously or in breakout rooms. And I found some of the political dynamics were less obtrusive as well. People who normally wouldn't speak up or participate because the boss is in the room and watching them felt more encouraged and empowered to join in. My co-moderator had a great idea to pick 2 people after each break to show and tell about something they had that was unique or interesting or just had a cool story behind. So here are the most important things I took away from the sessions. There were definitely more things I would do differently. More of this, less of that. But these nuggets remain constant since then. The 4-hour rule is the generally accepted notion that people start to fade after about 4 hours of Zoom time. It's more exhausting in ways you may not realize. Looking face to face with people for extended periods of time is stressful. Looking at yourself on camera while being conscious of the fact that everyone else can see you too is exhausting. The cognitive load is much higher in video calls. Remember how I mentioned that you give and receive more information in a Zoom call? Well, that's great, but that amazing brain I talked about hits the wall earlier than it used to because it's gaining so much information and it kind of turns into oatmeal around 4 hours. So video calls dramatically reduce your amount of mobility for long periods of time. And this article from Dinesh Ramachandran is in the Stanford News, and that's where I found the reasons behind these things. So even with regular breaks at the 60 to 90-minute mark, 4 hours is about all you can do in a day. The next thing is it's still asynchronous communication. So even though it seems more orderly, it's not natural. So as a moderator, you need to be watching closely to see if anyone is taking over someone else who's trying to say something, or talking over someone else who's trying to say something, especially if that person is less dominant in the conversation. Now, for those who know me, the irony of that coming from me is not lost, but it doesn't make it any less true. There's a blessing and a curse about breaking 2 sessions over 2 days. The blessing is that you get to synthesize the day's exercises before the next session. The curse is that you need to synthesize the day's exercise before the next session, so it can make for a long night. So that's the first segment where I get to preach, but hopefully I convince anyone here who still has doubts about going into the next segments that you still got this. So let's take about a 15-minute break. And when we come back, we can visit a little and I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Adam.
You bet. I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Take a little break. If you have any questions, we can throw them in the chat or we can just shout them out when we get back.
Yeah, okay, I see them now. Let's see. Yeah, I can't see these during the talk because my screens are all black. Let's see. Which book? Dana, which book are you asking about?
You were saying there was a book that of all the books we should get, and I wasn't sure if that author was on the screen.
Yes, that was Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. That's the big picture on the screen.
All right. Yeah, yeah.
And
I kind of
I'll
zoned
make
out.
Sure.
I zoned out for a moment.
No worries.
Thank you.
And actually, this will all be available. The speaker notes for this first segment, it's written out, as you all probably could tell. Yeah, all the speaker notes will be there, all the references, all the links, even the notes I used during the sketch along. I'll put a shot of those in there too. So yeah, you'll get all the goodies afterwards. Let's see, any other questions here? Yeah, back of the napkin. Day stuff. Okay. I was talking about a person whose book was not. Okay. Oh, wow. All right, a little bit rocky.
No,
But I
it's
have the afternoon to get it right.
It's fine. It's great. Thank you, Paula, for putting the names of the books and the authors in the chat too. I appreciate that. And Adam, you're going to be down at UX San Antonio with Paula's group.
Yeah.
Early August?
Yeah. My good friend and former coworker, Susan Price, is down there, and she's been involved with, heavily involved with the UX community down there with TEDx San Antonio and some other things, and love her to death. And she asked me, you know, would I mind doing a presentation? So I was thinking, well, I've got a couple new things in the can. And she was like, let's look at your greatest hits. Let's talk about some things. And so I rolled out some of the things that I felt were better than others, and talked about some of the new ones too, and basically left it up to her. And she asked me to give a keynote that I gave at Big Design once, and also in New Zealand. And it's about my first design mentor. And that was kind of a watershed presentation for me, because for many years I kind of made my bones by sticking to the ground level stuff, giving everybody stuff, things they could put in their pocket and walk away with. And that's what today's about. But or starting out with whatever's pissing me off and then because you're passionate about it already. And that used to be the advice I'd give. But you have to offer a solution, otherwise you're just ranting. So, and there was never anything I wasn't pissed about. So anyway, when I was asked to do the keynote, I thought, okay, well, I gotta spread a bigger net. And so I was sitting there in bed at night with my iPad and writing stuff and thinking stuff, and my wife's sitting there grading papers next to me, and she finally just slams her book down because I'm sitting there muttering to myself and think, no, I could do that. Well, I could do that. No. And she slams her book down, looks at me and says, look, you're over 50 years old. You have been in this business as long as anybody. You have met and worked with and been around amazing people all your bloody life. Somewhere there's a story. And so, yeah, that was the first time I sort of turned the lens back on sort of my longer history. And that was when I thought about Max, who I hadn't thought about in a while. And that became that story. And so at one point I wanted to put it on the shelf, because after I gave it the first couple times, I got choked up a little bit. And I said, yeah, I can't do that one again. I'm just gonna put that away, because if it ever becomes a performance, then it's no good. And I was talking to Russ Unger about that. And if you know Russ, he runs the UX camp, and he and I have done some stuff to help speakers in the past. And we were talking about that, and he shook his head and said, nope. I said, what? He said, it choked you up. It's going to choke you up every time. And so I thought, okay, well, let's dust this one off. So yeah, it's going to be virtual. So I'll put a plug in there for Paula. It's UX San Antonio. And
Paula, feel free to throw the meetup link in the chat too.
Yeah.
And we can, hopefully people will see it when they get back. But yeah, definitely put a link. I saw it on LinkedIn the other day, I think. I don't know if
it sounds like it's going to be mostly virtual. But when and I think that was the expectation, is that I would do it virtually too. And I was like, you know what? I think I'd like to see people. And they're like, well, it's kind of a long drive for you, and it's hotels and stuff you got to take care of. I was like, I don't care.
it's a fun town.
I love San Antonio. Well, I was in the Air Force, so I got more than my share of it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But my daughter's going down with me, who has at 21 is now my muse. She is my best editor and objective eye, looking at the things I'm doing. She was up with me till about 4 o'clock last night, going through the narrative and looking at the design of the screens, and so we were tweaking it into the wee hours. But she helped me in Sydney, and she helped me with this, and I always feel like I've got my feet a little better planted every time.
Yeah.
And for anybody who doesn't know, I told Jen this earlier, she is the student co-chair for the IA conference this year. And I don't know if you know about that one, but I have been involved in it now for 22 years. I'm a former co-chair myself. And last year they began trying to think about how they could create a co-chair role for students to be a liaison. And so last year, Claire Morville, who's the daughter of Peter Morville, who wrote the definitive work on IA, the Polar Bear book, was the first student co-chair. And so she kind of scratched the surface on some things, but there really wasn't time to do a lot, because it's not a ceremonial position. You are one of the co-chairs, and she was handling finance, and she was handling some other things too. And so at the end of that, they said, okay, we need to get somebody else in here though, who, knows the people, knows the industry, knows about events. And we were talking about that, and somebody kind of gave me a wink, and I started thinking about it. I said, well, I know somebody. Nell had been helping me out in conferences since she was 12. And she's been coming to workshops and going to workshops where she doesn't tell anybody her last name. And so we talked about it, and we said, okay, there's a lot of work to do to get this thing set up so that we can start to vet students when they're underclassmen, so that by the time they're juniors or seniors, we understand and know enough, and they've had enough presence that we feel comfortable putting them in a co-chair slot, which means we can extend that role to students who've attended virtually, students who maybe don't come from bigger schools, or students who aren't necessarily middle-class white folks. So we're excited about getting this set up. A little bit of criticism because we've got, a little nepotism going on there, where this is 2 second-gen polar bears, with another second-gen polar bear who's going to be volunteering this year. But I think we're out after that. I don't know if there are any more. So hopefully we'll get this thing sorted out so that we can start throwing that curtain a little broader and giving some other people an opportunity to step into this role.
Mhm.
So how are we on
Has it-
time? We need
I
to
was
get
just going
going?
to say, has it been 15? I think,
don't know.
Adam, there are a couple questions in the chat if we want to go
Okay.
ahead and get started.
Yeah.
I'll read them to you.
Yeah.
Paula has the question, why do you consider Zoom as asynchronous? I can understand that to be true if it's a webinar, but why is facilitation of a meeting considered asynchronous?
When it's online, I used to do these things called information transfer analysis, and it's made up of several information transfer points. And if you ever took speech or something like that, you probably have seen some model of this. So there's a place where information originates. There's a way that it gets communicated. There is a way that it gets received. And then something happens to it where there is either a response, or it's distributed elsewhere, or, and it goes back along the same lines, or it's archived or saved. And when you've got a group of folks like this, and it's probably more prevalent or easy to notice when you're used to doing these things with a bunch of people in the room, which was always hard for me because my hearing isn't great, which means when a bunch of people start talking, it's really hard to parse. And even when you have people working in separate groups in the room, it's still kind of hard. So when you're online like this, just because of the nature of the microphone, 2 people can't really talk at the same time. And so even though it's the smallest of margins, it is still message received, returned, received, returned, received, returned. So it's not broadly asynchronous, like, say, a college class where I throw up a film of me doing a lecture and then everybody works on it. And maybe they ask me questions, or maybe they don't, and then they turn their stuff in, and then I respond. That's broad asynchronous. Email is a little closer asynchronous. Text a little closer than that. Social media can be faster or slower, and this is probably about as close as you get to being synchronous without being. So I hope that answered the question. And what do we got next?
Unmute. Next question is from Rachel Smith, and that is, do you recommend a certain amount of time or to practice per day, or for sketching, or can you practice until you feel okay with the work that you've done?
The answer is yes. Earlier, I mentioned that I knew some people who could do a lot with very few lines. And one thing they have in common is that they sketch constantly in every meeting, in every moment where they're not up in front making conversation. they're sketching. And that's why I think they probably have, one of the most some of the most practiced hands I've ever seen in this. And that translates great to a whiteboard where, again, you don't want to use a lot of lines. And when we get into the sketching, the sketch along, you're going to see how that works. And you're going to see that by just a little bit of finesse, you can make stick people do a whole lot of things. So it's really whatever your appetite's for. And I have to admit, I don't practice as much. I wish I did. And frankly, when I look at my sketching, I can see that. But when I talk to those same guys about, you know, wishing I had that sort of clean execution and simplicity that they do, they're like, yeah, but dude, you have this, you got a recognizable style. And people know it now. And the other guy who was my boss at the time actually put me in charge of teaching people how to use the whiteboard when they showed up, because that's such a big part of how we communicated in the before times. And the reason I could do that was because I stole shit from everybody else. So I was this kind of repository of everybody's tips and tricks. So yeah, practice as much as it makes sense to you. And if you feel like you know, reach a point where you can do as much as you feel like you need to, you know, if the enjoyment of it doesn't keep you rolling along, then yeah, you're good to go.
There's been efforts online, and I cannot for the life of me remember her name, that had 100 day of sketching, and she would
Mhm.
throw a topic out there, and you would sketch along. And I know I did that one
I think
time.
that was Christina. I think that was
Christine.
Christina Wiki.
Oh, it could have been. It could have been.
Yeah.
And she would throw like disc or save or communicate,
Mhm.
and you were to sketch that.
Yeah.
And so that was a fun way to kind of practice, because if you think about it, it's tricky. How do you sketch communicate? Or
Yeah.
like Adam had, facilitate. How do you sketch that? So
Yeah.
that was kind of that was a fun little stretch exercise for me to kind of like, ooh, yeah, how do I sketch that?
Yeah. And we'll get to play with that a little bit. There's a big difference between being asked to draw a cat and being asked to communicate an abstract idea, but it can be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Christina, and that was the midst of her own exploration into sketching. She decided she wanted to get good at it, and so that was how she did it. She read some stuff and started doing little doodles and finding different exercises, like, you know, drawing a scribble and then turning it into a picture. And her daughter was younger then, and they would sit and do that together, and that was kind of a fun thing. But yeah, so when she kind of came out the other end of that, and sort of like you were asking, you know, she reached um, the level of facility that she felt like she needed, and that's when she wrote the book. It's a little handbook size thing, but it's pretty good.
Yeah. Cool. That's all the questions we have. I have a quick request, if we could get people to turn on their camera really fast so that I can take a nice group shot so that we can put that on the website. Ooh, I love seeing all the faces. This is good stuff. I might have spelled Watkey's last name wrong.
WODTKE.
Woke. Ooh, I was right. I can't believe it. Miracles. Great. So I'm going to take some photos. So that's for those who are still here.
Come on, Austin. We saw you earlier.
Yeah. She might still be stepping away. So I'm going to take a few, because for me, I always have my eyes closed in a photo. Never fails. And so let's do a fun one where we're all kind of like waving, if you want. Yeah. Love that. All right, cool. I might take another one later, but Adam, back to you. Thank you.
All right. So when we left our heroes, let me set things up and share my screen in a second here. I don't have enough desk space, and I got like 20 little controllers here and cameras and what's. Who needs a keyboard? Oh. Right. screen again. I should have been doing this during the break. I apologize. Okay. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. And this is the part. This is the whiteboard, and I have a little stack of them here. So I'm going to use that, but I'm also going to switch over to my notebooks on occasion. Because as you look at the deck, there are, let's see, there are lots of examples of, different kinds of work. Most of the pen sketches are straight out of my notebook. And I just take pictures of them and then I drop them in Sketch and clean them up a little bit, especially if they're black and white, so that I can have clean black and white and no light bounces and shadows and stuff like that. And then I can drop them into the deck, into presentations. There's a lot of cool ways to do that, but it all starts with a pencil sketch or a pen sketch rather. So let's see. So in the promotion conversations that we were putting out there on LinkedIn, I keep saying again and again that if you can write, you can do this. And the reason that I say that is because we're going to start with an alphabet. And I'm going to draw, and everybody, if you got your pens and your pencils and all your good stuff out, whatever it is, pencil, paper, iPad, all works. I'd like you to draw along with me so that you will prove to yourself that there's nothing we're talking about and nothing that I've drawn here that you can't draw. So here's the alphabet, and this comes from Dave Gray as well. So it's not going to be the neatest thing in the world. And I'm going to do one thing real quick, just because it's one of the things I love about whiteboards is the notion of subtraction. So, oh, that looks so cool. Your finger works too. That's crap. There's another reason I love whiteboards. No, that one.
Might want to move the camera angle. We're not seeing this bottom row that you're.
I'm running out of room. Probably gonna switch boards in a second.
Yeah.
These are in no particular order, so it doesn't matter if you need to move somewhere else on the paper. Get a little more distance. There we go. Can I see if I can zoom out a little? Nope. Okay, so oh yeah. So that's your alphabet. not very big, but I promise you that with these shapes, you can sketch anything you want. And everything that we're going to sketch, you know, in the next little while, is going to use them, and you're going to see how they're used. And that's one of the keys to sketching, is being able to break things down to sort of like their basic geometric shapes. Has anybody ever seen somebody draw Mickey Mouse? He's circles. Winnie the Pooh is circles. With just a little bit of embellishment. So we'll do a little fun thing with that too. So if anybody's using a whiteboard or anything perishable, take a minute, take a picture. And if you got that, we'll go on to the next bit. So
you removed it so quickly.
Oh.
Want us to snap a picture
oh,
there?
I meant like take a picture of your own. I meant take a
Oh,
picture.
okay. I understand now.
Dana, you gonna be high maintenance?
Probably.
You know I love you more than my luggage, right?
Hey, dyslexia, I blame it on that.
Okay. So with those shapes that we just drew, if any of you have ever been in an art class, they talk about the elements of design, and they're not complex things, but some of those are line and shape. And so if you take any of those designs, you can turn them in to an ear, you can embellish the simple triangle into a pyramid. I think everybody in school, if you ever doodled, drew a three-dimensional box, a cube. Or you do technical design, you had to show somebody what a database looked like on a flow chart. But yeah, a squiggle line, make it really squiggly. And what you start to see is it begins to convey emotion. And so with that three-dimensional box idea, if I'm going too fast, please shout out, because I don't want to leave anybody saying, well, screw this.
Are we supposed to be sketching too, Adam, or are we just kind of watching?
No, you're sketching.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Everybody's sketching, right? Everybody's got
No.
their stuff to draw with.
No,
I think
no.
we're
We-
I think
we
you're
didn't
moving a little
know.
too fast. Yeah, I thought we were just watching.
We were just watching you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you with me so far?
No, but we will
Okay.
be.
So yeah, if you need to see the alphabet again.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Can you talk a little bit about why that's the alphabet? Is that our basis for all that we're going to be, or for drawing a lot of things?
Yeah, it really is. Just those few.
Yeah, let's do that again. I mean,
Hmm.
I'd like to see
Yeah,
it. I
it
don't know
doesn't-
about
it doesn't-
everybody else.
Mhm. And there's some stuff that I'm putting in here that I missed the first time, because I've actually got 3 alphabets laying here and I started with the wrong one. And again, I got this from Dave Gray and in that article about time to sketch. And if you look, there are lots of versions of this, but frankly, everything I'm going to put here in one way or another is in every one of the other ones. It's kind of a ovoid shape. A circle. I think it's everything. Oh, there we go. Arabesque, which is really just kind of another version of that. I'll move it so you don't have the light bounce. So yeah, this really is the alphabet for, you know, any little line sketch or drawing that you want to do. And like I was saying before, if you look at any of your favorite cartoons, try to look at them broken down into these basic shapes, because that's how they all start on a cartoonist artboard. And I mentioned Mickey Mouse because there's probably not a better example of that than watching an illustrator who draws Mickey for a living draw Mickey, which is 3 circles. A little circle in the middle, a circle for an eye. So by understanding these guys and kind of taking those on board, you ought to be able to unpack anything you look at into those shapes, and by using those shapes, give a representation of the thing you're looking at or the thing in your brain. Make sense? And this is where practice comes in, at least in the outset. Get these laid down, put them on a sticky note or something like that. And pull that out whenever you want to start sketching something, because those are going to be your Legos every time. So any questions on that before we roll on? Nope. Okay. So from there, I was talking about how pretty much any of these can be finessed into something that communicates something a little bit more. So, you know, we have a wavy line and we have the choppy line. So this is somebody who I guess is in defib. But now just that one line evokes a whole bunch of images in your head. You think about emergency rooms, or you know, being in an ambulance, or you know, any circumstance where they're watching somebody's vital signs to make sure they're alive, and if there's any aberration there, like there is here, there's a story. Oh my God, what's going on? And that's one line. Let me see. Okay, this is one of my little parlor tricks. So everybody's typed emoji, right? We're drawing emoji. Yeah. There's a way to up your game with emoji drawing. And the way that I like to illustrate this is by pointing out the difference between cats and dogs. Does anybody know the main difference between cats and dogs? Dogs have eyebrows. Dogs look guilty when they are. Cats play it cool. So when all you have is a few little dots here and a pair, you know, just a set of pairs of eyes here, you can add emotion. Oops, when the pen isn't dried out, add emotion with eyebrows. Get this one from Charlie Brown, Charles Schultz, when somebody's really stressed out or tired. Let's see, what's another good one? Yeah, that's enough. But you get the idea. So just eyes, you drop some eyebrows on them, and now you've got a set of emotions, and emotion now has added a layer to what look, you know, with just a few little scribbles on a sketchboard or a pad, and that gives you something to talk about. So how many of you have done journey maps? And you don't have to sing out, but okay, sure. Donna Leishaw wrote a book about journey mapping. It's one of the Rosenfeld books. And I don't, I think I have that link somewhere, but I will share that when I share the notes. But the big thing, the thing that really caught my attention was that she added the importance of emotion to the journey maps. So while you could do Dave Gray's empathy map and talk about a person in terms of what they're seeing and hearing and thinking and saying and doing, and there's a list of things. That's great. But you put those along a path and you're sort of marching down this path, and you're looking at, if you put the empathy map together with the path, you've got now an X and a Y axis, and you can look at any intersection and look at what you can say about a person in a particular stop on a path, and you can derive what their emotion might be. So somebody who's, you know, kid falls and breaks his arm, and mom's going to take him to the hospital, the emergency room. So she's kind of freaked out, right? Because maybe his arm doesn't look the way it's supposed to, which is always kind of gross. But so there's a particular emotion associated with that. And then it's about finding a place to go, or maybe you know where you're going to go and you call ahead, or you don't. You climb in the car and you head on out. You go rolling in, and everybody can see your kid's arms pointing south instead of north. And then the kid's going in to be treated, and while mom is still concerned about the kid, there's a lady saying, excuse me, ma'am, we're going to need you to fill these out. And so where she was sort of panicked and worried, now she's sidetracked and she's annoyed, maybe even pissed, or at least just sort of distracted. Because, you know, I don't know, is there, you know, any other time you could ask me to do this? Up until the point that the kid gets out, they got the cast, they go home, he gets ice cream. But you can see how your emotions in situations like that are a roller coaster. And so when you do a journey map and you map this scenario out, you can go down to the bottom of that and say, okay, if this is really happy and this is really pissed, somewhere in the middle there is kind of a range. And so even though they're digital now, they all started out as sketches, but that's how I do journey maps now. I've got a scale of little faces that runs down the left and right, and there's colors that go from blue to red, so that when you've taken the journey map information and you derive an emotion from that, you can now put that on the map as an element of that journey. So you're basically mashing together 3 different exercises. But Emotion is what people start to relate to. And so you can add emotion to the conversation and take a bunch of business requirements and state them as a story, and then maybe provide a little sketch of some eyes and some stick people and some happy faces and sad faces and something that looks stressful that could just be that. Anybody who's asked to, if they have that much imagination, could look at that and say, wow, here's what I think when I see that. This is all leading up to something, I promise. So now we're going to talk about people. If you've been in design, if you've ever taken any formal classes or anything, you know, everybody's got sort of like their own little way to draw, you know, heads and shoulders and get proportion and all that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, usually something along these lines, and you do your crosshatch and shoulders. You know, and if it's a man, you make a V. If it's a woman, you do a triangle, something like that. Okay, so that's the art school life. That doesn't look too hard, does it? I'm going to make it easier. When I want to draw a person, I give them a head. I give them a body. So those are two shapes straight out of the alphabet, right? I'm going to give them legs. And a hand. Then I'm going to give them eyes. Maybe some eyebrows. And they're happy. And here's another little thing that I added that this is kind of a Dave Gray stick person, but there's one little thing I added that I got from another designer. He always put a nose. So how's that cool? When you have a nose, you can direct your person's attention to something. So if I'm drawing a stick figure, a guy, could be a lady, who's, let's go ahead and make it a lady with a bad hairdo, who's talking to their dog, and they're giving them some loves. You can now tell exactly where the dog is looking and where the person is looking. So again, just a little thing that takes something very flat and gives it a little bit of dimension. But it's still a stick figure. And I've done some fairly lengthy and complex documents where this or something like it is the most detailed piece on it. Put enough of these guys together and you can tell a story. Because it's not just where their face is looking or what their eyebrows look like, your body communicates. So if I draw this person what could you say about him? You could get elaborate and there could be a story. Maybe he's watching an ant trail, but for the most part, I think, you look at him and think, well, he looked kind of down.
Might want to spend a little more time. Just there's some internet lag for some, so just a little more time
Oh, okay.
sharing, just a little bit. Thank you.
Can you send up a flare or something when it's good to go on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just add a few more seconds.
Okay.
In between, like when you're like sketching and sharing, and yeah.
Okay.
Just
So where this guy looks kind of sad, this person could be either happy or falling off a cliff. Either way, you can make a reasonable guess at what their emotion might be. All good. Now, there's another aspect to drawing people. And this is, again, what I'm showing you here is really explicitly for sketching, because you can do it quick, you can communicate something, and you can get rid of it just as quick. Now, sometimes the person is a very important player. They may have a name, they may have, we may know something about them, they may represent one of your persona, somebody you specifically identified, and know about this person that is going to become your amalgam for the user. So sometimes you need stick people who just represent people. If we don't know anything about them, but they just represent people in a situation. If you've ever done any of those corporate ethics courses or things like that, where they have those very sort of stylish, watercolored, people with big long legs and big pants, it's the same kind of thing. You just don't need to go to that effort. It looks nice, gets the idea across. But I have done designs where that's a person. And because it's so quick to draw, I like to use that one when I got to draw a lot of people. It's just kind of up to you. You can add a little more dimension. And, and then we got our stick folks that we just talked about. Okay. Are we good? And one of those guys that I mentioned who has such great skill with simple lines has what he calls popsicle people. And they look like this. And you can do 100 different variations on this. The only difference is that they, Just kind of little geometric shapes. Can represent a man or a woman or a child or anybody in between. And they don't necessarily need to be articulated, meaning they don't have to have joints and things. All they really need to do is represent, this is a woman. So she's suited to be on a bathroom door or just to represent somebody recognizable in a group. Now, some variations on the others that, on the ones that we were doing earlier. Take that same head. Go ahead and give them a nose. And this is their body. That's about the only difference. I always made the noses too long and look like a snowman. And so this is maybe, I used to do these for a while, and maybe they look like something that's a little more mid-century modern that, again, just so all I really did is I just changed the legs. Or you can, you know, still using geometric shapes, just keep going with the shape. So what is a line in one circumstance is just a series of shapes right out of the alphabet.
Should we share, Adam? Should we share any of our people that we've drawn?
If you like, but we're going to get to do that later. You
Oh,
know,
we're doing
really,
later. Okay, gotcha.
yeah, really all you need to do, all I'd like you to do right now is just
Practice.
draw along with me as best you can. And
Okay.
hopefully, if you don't really draw much, hopefully you're being amazed at your own work. And in so doing, realizing that this is about as good as it needs to be. I mean, I began as an illustrator. I've been doing this for, I realized bleakly yesterday, almost 40 years. But if I weren't, and I've been doing this for quite a while, and if it wasn't working, I think I'd probably know by now. Somebody would have said something. And they wouldn't keep asking me to do it again. So, you know, we showed the dog. And again, that's how stories are told. They're about interactions. They're about touch points.
Adam, before you move on to the next sketch, Raul has his hand raised. Looks like we have a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Jen. My question is, you know, how you showed us the emotions on those on the emoticons. Is there a an alphabet for those? Because I struggle to make a person happy and sad or questioning, you know, or confused. And I know the eyebrows do the trick, but is there a like a lexicon that I could leverage? It'd be like, if you put them this, that it shows that this person is thinking about something, or this shows that they're confused.
Yeah. I can't think of one in particular because really that's just sort of a mashup
Okay.
of stuff that I paid attention to. And it's not necessarily a study of human emotion. It's a study of sketching and cartooning, and looking at how other people do things. And fortunately, I work in a place where I get to see a lot of that. However, I can show you one thing. And I love this because a couple of college guys developed this. And Scott McLeod told me about this. It's an app, and unfortunately, not a cheap one. Let me adjust my brightness here.
What's the name of the app? Do you recall? Adam? Oh,
It's called Grimace. Grimace. And it's, I think the idea, it was a college project, and I think the idea was that it's understood that there are really only 6 emotions, pure emotions, that we can display. Those being joy, surprise, fear, sadness, disgust, and anger. Now, obviously, we feel a whole lot more things than that. But these are, what do you call them? These are the baselines. And so your facial expression can be a combination. So beginning with joy, just joy by itself, you got the neutral face, and you run the slider over, and they go from being kind of happy to really happy. And you have to set aside for a moment that this was done by, I think these guys were either in Japan or China, and facial expressions mean different things in different countries. And so while these are pure emotions, there's a little bit of weirdness here in terms of how somebody in the West might interpret this look, but it does a good enough job. And by having this, if you want to draw somebody who is sad, really sad, or somewhere in between, you can see how
That's
it
amazing.
goes from one extreme to the other. You can also mix them. So if you're sad and surprised, and you can only mix 2. If you're disgusted and angry, or you're happy, but you're scared. So, yeah, you can monkey around with this. Just if you know what kind of emotion you're going for, build it right here, and that'll give you the basics to look at it. Give you the
Yeah.
eyebrows, give you the
That's-
mouth, tell you what the eyes are doing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Adam.
You bet. I don't know what it costs now, but it was like $20. Okay, they're college kids. Probably need the money. Get some light back in here.
It's 99 cents, Rachel says.
No kidding.
Well, worth it.
I should have waited.
What a bargain.
Yeah. So for a while when I was doing user journeys, I basically made little comic strips of these people. And once again, there's so many different things that you can convey. So you can convey things with posture. Here's another one. Another way to show emotion. Because emotion doesn't just show on your face, it shows in your whole body. And something else you learn about if you go to design school is that your body is like a suspension bridge, meaning that every bit of it relies on every other bit of it for its structure. And so if something moves, then other stuff moves accordingly. So anybody who's ever had back problems knows about, how your body counterbalances itself. I blew a knee out decades ago, and so for a long time I favored one leg, and that now shows up in my back, so I'm getting to deal with that. That's because your body is always trying to balance itself out. So if you're mad, it's not just your face that shows it, it's also whether you're tense or your posture, where you hunched over or leaning back, legs out and crossed or tucked up under you. Where I go. This one's nicer looking. I kind of have a sequence for these things, but I'm really more interested in what happens when the conversation starts. So I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit. You can also communicate dynamics, such as motion. Or you can generate feelings such as suspense. So when you're doing journey maps again, or any other situation where you're putting people in an environment, you can use very simple things to using that same alphabet to create trees and houses and cars and buildings and anything else that a person might encounter that would affect either their frame of mind or move a story forward. And I don't expect everybody to remember this all word for word. That's why we record it, and that's why I send out all my stuff afterwards. So you'll have a reference. So I want to talk about a few things that are specific to whiteboards, which is kind of how this whole thing began. But before I do that, so I can't see everybody, but if you can for Jen, give her a show of hands about who in the room still uses whiteboards, or has that really gone by the wayside because either of the lockdown or just not how you operate?
Yeah, why don't you do the emoji, either if your video's on, show it up, or if you use the emoji of, any of them. We got some hands up in the video if you use. Some people use Miro in Figma. Yeah, thumbs up. A lot of Miro users.
So the reason I'm asking about whiteboards is this is about the only whiteboard I use these days. I've only been back in the office one day since. And I suppose if I were back there, I'd be back using them all the time. And it was during that time that I discovered that there's some unique things about the medium. But if it's the reason I've changed this talk so much is because I think for a lot of people, it may have become irrelevant. So would you like me to talk about peculiarities of whiteboards? Because if not, we can do some other stuff. Because if that's just, if you don't think you're going to have a use, or you don't want to have a use, that's fine too. We can do some other stuff. It's just I can't see, so I can't.
Go ahead and throw in the chat. I'm seeing some yes, please. Yeah, lots of yes, please. So go for it, Adam.
All right.
I mean, even a virtual whiteboard, Adam, sometimes people prefer to draw, or they'll draw by hand on paper, take a picture of it and throw it in a virtual whiteboard. I've done that a lot. So I can still see the virtual whiteboard being a medium for sketching, even if you do
and I think I forgot to mention that part, but in that discovery that happened the week after the lockdown started, one of the things that I just didn't want to let go of was, I was talking about the importance of things being handmade, and I didn't want to let go of this entirely organic way of communicating, because pixels can be kind of cold in the early stages until you start to get a little further along the line with designers. And so that's exactly what I did. I got these whiteboards out, and so at different points in the discovery, I did a mind map. I made a couple lists. I did a few things to sketch out little heads for the users so that we could distinguish them for the persona, and did exactly what you said, Jennifer. I wrote them here, took a picture, cleaned them up a little bit, stuck them up on the Miro board, and so those remain now as artifacts of those discovery sessions. So what I love about whiteboards is what I've been talking about with the rest of this stuff. It's temporary. And there's no doubt in anybody's mind that it's temporary just because of the nature of what it is. Sometimes it's when you go into high fidelity stuff right away, it's hard sometimes to get people's heads around the fact that even if it has colors and images and all this other stuff, and it looks very sort of finished, if it's still a white frame, and by excuse me, a wireframe, and by that I mean a low risk sketch on which you're making a lot of decisions, you're asking and answering a lot of questions. So even if it's done digitally, if you can't wad it up and throw it away, then it's not a wireframe. So I was going somewhere. I'm sure it was really profound. Now it's lost forever. Whiteboards, speed, immediacy. All these things that we've been sketching are also designed to happen quick, so that you don't have a client or anybody else thinking you've invested a whole bunch of time in something, and therefore, without saying anything, just being reluctant to change anything. And so they may self-censor themselves out of something you really need to know. So when I joined Bottle Rocket, I walked into this whiteboard community. It's a whiteboard culture. And as I said, I was walking around this place and looking at just amazing line work that everybody was doing on the walls. There was color and direction and motion and all this kind of stuff. And I just thought, oh God. And then just to sort of nail it home, there's a guy named James Helms, who is he's one of the vice presidents that designed Intuit. He was there at the time. And in the morning, he had some sketches for something he was working on. And in the afternoon, he had a working prototype of it. Still sketches, but using a tool that's not around anymore, but kind of does what the same thing as these others. I think it was called Field App or something. But I looked at that and thought, holy shit. For me to do something like that at my prior company would have taken 3 weeks of meetings about meetings before I would finally be in a position to be allowed to build it. This guy had an idea in the morning, had a working prototype by lunch. And that was a wake-up call. Oh, man, I'm gonna have to kick the rest off. So yeah, that was why I went and bought some stuff, and I worked in secret until the time came. So what I'm going to go through here in terms of whiteboarding are much more tactical things. So it's not so much about the esoteric things of emotion and things like that, because those things all are still true. But because whiteboard plays into the hands so well of being quick and being temporary and being easy to change or easy to discard, there's a lot of little tips I've learned about how to make sure that things get communicated well along the way. And so these aren't in any particular order, but they're good little tricks. And a lot of these translate to sketching too. So the first thing, have you ever drawn a box and you had to write something in it and the last 5 letters are all scrunched up in one end? The trick here is I misspelled it. So by writing out the words first, now I can write a box. Nice padding all the way around, nice and centered. And not even that great a box. But it looks a lot better than right? I hope everybody's laughing and enjoying this because I got no signals. Next thing is that letters are shapes. So just as we are looking at drawing shapes because we know how to draw letters, you can also know that letters are shapes and incorporate that into what you're doing. And the reason that I bring this up is because my daughter and several friends of mine, including another one of those people who's such a great sketcher, are dyslexic. And that one person in particular talks a lot about learning how to learn. And one of the big turning points for him was when he realized that every letter in the alphabet and every word is just a glyph. Anybody who reads Chinese or Korean or some of the other languages where you can have an individual letter, but you can also have a collection of symbols that mean a whole concept. And when he, knowing that, when he started looking at, the words that he'd struggled with his whole life, when that connection was made, he realized that he'd just learned how to learn. And all of this became, being able to write things became so much easier for him, and reading and doing anything else. He just learned to recognize the shapes. So, a letter A could be that. Could be that. Anybody's ever done any font design or read about that? There is a whole lot of mechanics that go into font design, but at the very least, you just need to be able to, you ought to be able to look at these things and see them as shapes. And when you can see them as shapes, you can begin to stylize them a little bit because you know what the core shape needs to be. So just like when we draw a stick person, I mean, the simplest stick person, we can there's a Jack in the Box now. I'm going to show you something else here with this one. Another thing that more than, where to put it? Well, of course, if I didn't need it, it would be right here. No, I'll just use this one. Oh, there we go. Another thing I like about whiteboards is the ability to subtract. I've done a lot of whiteboards, and one of the things that I love to do is to add some depth or emphasis to something by making it all black. And reversing out some of that black to add a little more weight to it. And the first time I saw this done, I was working with that same strategist who asked me to do that work the first time, and found out that day I knew how to draw. He and I were working on some stuff, and we were drawing some things. We were banging some ideas around, and as we drew something, he colored in a little block and reached into his shirt pocket and brought out a toothpick. And he went up with a toothpick and he started using that to remove, I think it was a button. And so he wanted it to be reversed out. So he filled in a block, and then he wrote the label for the button in there so that you had white on a darker color. That's a really simple thing, but I was amazed. And like everything else I stole, I kind of ran with that. So for a while I started thinking, okay, well, what would be better for that? Because I don't always have a toothpick, and sometimes I need to wipe more space than a toothpick can do. So first thing I used were delivery chopsticks, because they're such soft wood, and that you can actually create kind of a chiseled point, just like on a marker. There's a thin end and there's a fat side. And that's important too, because emphasis can be created by line weight. So I went from the chopsticks, which I used for quite a while. And then I had a brief moment where I realized, you know what, a regular old rubber pencil eraser will work. And, I had my good old Ticonderoga here. And so if I had a straight line on a mind map, or even in a drawn wireframe, where I wanted to show maybe where something cuts off, or something that maybe isn't necessarily a hard path or a separate path, and I could go through and I had a dotted line. So it looked a hell of a lot better than the first line drew. So another thing that I realized too is when you're writing on a whiteboard, things need to be legible, right? And for that reason, capital letters work better than camel case. And just to sort of demonstrate that, this is hard because I never write in lowercase almost ever. So if you were to stand back from this, let's say you're 5, 10, 15 feet away, which one do you think you're going to be able to read better? And another thing that goes with this is that slow down, because fast will usually be kind of sloppy. Because even though I still stray a little bit up here, it's still a little more deliberate than it is down here. Jen, are people nodding or are they all asleep?
Well, videos are off from what I can for a few people. So,
Okay.
does anybody have any? Okay, Raul's still going. He just turned his camera on. Does anybody have any? There was a quick question about the pen that you used white on that when you were drawing the tuxedo.
Oh, it's not a pen, it's an eraser.
Okay, that's what they were asking. Was it an eraser or
Yeah.
a pen?
And yeah, this is sort of the final evolution of where I got with that, which is just being a picky dilettante, I suppose, because my finger works just as well, or an eraser or a cheap chopstick. I certainly don't need to order erasers from Japan, which is what I did. But yeah, I've also got a bigger, thicker eraser. If I'm doing big, thick work with big, thick pens, sometimes the little tiny stuff doesn't work so well.
Okay. Another question here, Adam, is kind of about the comfort of writing in caps versus small case. How do you get comfortable, or like, could you talk a little bit about maybe the pros and cons from what you found of writing all caps versus not?
So it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I grew up in a time when everybody was taught handwriting, script. And for some reason, I had a pretty nice hand for writing. But I'm also one of those kids that back then, if you started out left-handed, they would train you out of it. And so for a long time, I had a little bit of a disconnect between writing with my right hand and wanting to do things with my left hand. And like a lot of kids, basically it was I won't say beat, but it was trained out of me. Now the extension of that is I grew up playing soccer, and I did until I was about 25, I guess. I played in Europe, but I could shoot or cross with either foot. If anybody knows what I'm talking about. Shooting is taking a direct shot on goal. Crossing is kicking the ball way across over so that somebody else can kick it in the goal. I'm also what they call a goofy footer on a skateboard. Not that I've been on a skateboard in more than 30 years. That means I push with my right foot at the back of the board, and I stand up facing my right instead of pushing with my foot at the front of the board and standing up facing my left. And goofy footer is a term that comes from surfing. So a left-footed surfer is called a goofy footer. But when it comes to writing, I've also learned since that caps are easier for some people. My dad always wrote in block letters. And then you add to the fact that I was an illustrator before there were computers around. And so if you've ever seen anybody write who has education as an architect, they just about all write the same way. A little bit of flourishes here and there, but anytime somebody starts writing on a whiteboard, if they've had any training in architecture, I can tell. Where'd you go to school for architecture? And so being in that space, doing a lot of mechanical work, it sort of fell to me a little more naturally. So it wasn't a struggle for me. But I didn't really become deliberate about it until I started doing more of this kind of work. Because there were times when I would slip back in, to writing upper lowercase. But I just sort of made myself do it. Partly because I had to go back and read enough of my notes that if they weren't in caps, I had trouble reading them. So that's kind of an oblique response. I guess it comes down to just doing it until it starts to feel right. So you don't have to think about it. It's just like any sport or anything else when you kind of want to develop muscle memory. And that's true about all those.
Okay. Thanks.
Because whether you play music or draw or play sports or you're a mechanic, when you've done something repeatedly long enough, when it becomes muscle memory, that means that you don't have to be paying very specific attention to everything you do, which means you could be paying attention to the other things that are going on, which means that if you're capturing quick sketches, you don't have to be heads down. You can be watching what's going on to get the information to do that sketch. And so I guess that's kind of how you'll know when you've reached a point where you start to feel more comfortable, is when you realize that you don't have to think, you don't even have to look down to draw a circle. So I hope that helps.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Not in the chat. Does anybody want to come off of mute and ask Adam any questions right now?
I got more stuff to do. So we're not done.
Okay. That's good.
Right. Okay. So for right-handed folks and people who write left to right languages, this is kind of an extension of what, again, everybody learns in art school about how people look at and understand images. We start in the upper left-hand corner and we end up in the lower right-hand corner because that's how we read. Now, if you are in Morocco, you're gonna go this way, or Saudi Arabia. If you're writing Hebrew, same thing. So that was why I mentioned before about global considerations that a lot of times we don't have in this country. We grow up learning in this country about Western design theory. And I don't know, when I look at other things, I think it's kind of sluggish than things that I've seen in other parts of the world. So where this comes to bear sometimes is if any of you have ever designed a website that had to be in Arabic, I thought, my God, this is going to be miserable. And then I realized that if I designed it so that I could literally flip the screen, and nothing in terms of imagery was backwards, that I had my right to left language app. So a couple of other little things. When you're standing up at a whiteboard and you got things being drawn all over the place, it's not so much big, broad freehanding, especially when you're writing stuff. So you always need usually to balance yourself, at least your pinky, so that if there's something down here under your hand, you're not going to smudge it. Again, temporality. And so sometimes it just becomes my knuckle, but there's always something there to kind of brace my hand. Okay, and then I actually talked about this before, but when you look at this, there's a point for the there's a reason for the chiseled top. This one's not in the best shape. It's a little smudgy at the top, but you can say so many things about importance or emphasis or de-emphasis. There's also another little trick. If you want to square off your boxes, you got little trailing ends. Kind of neatens things up. And if you want things to look a little more aligned. But line weight communicates a lot, just like in any other medium. Let's see. We talked about subtraction. Talked about emotion a little bit. I've got a couple of little nuggets for that. Remember how I said, you know, the look of a line can suggest a lot of things. So if you're drawing a box, and I want something to look maybe a little less structured or maybe a little raw, maybe a little more raw, I could do something like that. Or I could take that same thing and by virtue of subtraction, clean it up. And so in terms of emotion and depth, I could do that box, or I can do something like this. Which has a little fun to it. Makes it a little whimsical looking. It's not straight, it's kind of round, and we think of round things as cute. That's why little babies are always round, so we don't eat them. And that becomes well, screw that. That becomes a TV. And I hope I'm still staying focused. Please, somebody say something if I'm sliding over too far.
Yeah, we can see. We're good.
Okay, so let's see. There's a little tension there. But if I go I wind up having to doctor smudges that I make all the time. this starts to look a little frantic. Give it some eyebrows, it's getting a little worse. All with a pair of googly eyes and one line for mouth. So again, if you can get to the point where you're not so much worried about the lines, but worried about what the lines are, thinking about what the lines are saying, and knowing that you're not just drawing a picture of eyes and a mouth, but by generating something that you can, that conveys an emotion, you just add another dimension to the conversation. Because now they're not just looking at a pair of googly eyes, but they see this stress, and maybe they're laughing at it, or maybe they begin to pick up on the stress themselves. But that's how people get interested, because there's two things we like. Most of us pick up so much more from what people draw, and we love stories. And this gets into speaking. So I get a lot of presentations, or I used to. I've kind of backed off on a lot of that. I've been helping other people do that more. But when you begin a presentation, when I'm working with other speakers, they usually, I run what's called a speaker studio at some different events. And people who are going to present at the conference will come in, and I usually have a room set up with a microphone and everything, and projector. And it's to do a tech check and get them plugged in, and let them make sure everything works, give them a chance to hear their own voice coming over the microphone. And sometimes I'll work through some of their talk, and I'll offer a few little tidbits here and there. There's not much you can tell somebody who's going on in an hour and a half. So it's a lot about building up confidence. But one of the things I do tell people to do is, this is kind of straying, but if any of you are ever giving presentations, whether you're doing it with sketching or not, if it's formal, don't do the ceremonial crap. Hello, my name is Adam Polansky. Today, I'm going to talk to you about, and here's the slide with all the wonderfulness of me. Everybody's just gone on a yawner because you lost them. And I tell people to ditch that, because they read the program, they know who you are, read the abstract, they maybe seen your posts, they've got a picture of you, so they know what you look like. That's why I put graffiti on mine on the first screen. And as far as trying to establish credibility, well, you're up on stage, so you won. So it's kind of yours to lose. So don't try to set that back up again. If you want any TED Talk that you watch, you're going to see that people go straight into the story. Two nuns walked into a bar. Everybody's going to lean in because the story is coming, and it's not deliberate. That's what we do as human animals. When we know that a story is coming, we're ready to listen. And by going straight in, you've got everybody's attention. Well, it's the same thing here. That's why simplicity of line is important. So I was spiraling there. Let's see. A few other little things. Anybody have any questions? We just got a little bit to go, and then we'll take another break.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I just added, I happen to have one of these Japanese type markers that's kind of used for calligraphy.
Is
I
it a
just was
brush?
curious, do things like that exist for whiteboards? Do you know?
I want to say yes. I believe I
Hold
have,
on, I got the volume. Hold on. What did you say? You want a what?
I believe I have seen brushes, and it might even be this company that makes them, but I have seen whiteboard brushes.
Okay.
So just like an ink brush. And if I remember right, it was one of these sort of double-ended episodes where you had a regular chisel point on one end and the brush was on the other. But now I'm wondering, I'm probably gonna go out and look. If I find anything, I'll point it your way.
So I'm noticing this
You're breaking up.
color.
I'm not getting.
Oh, I want to note on you. Can you hear me at all now?
Yeah.
My internet's terrible.
No.
So I happen to have a calligraphy marker. It's not, it's not a brush, it's a marker. And I just wanted to share, it's so much easier to make those different line weights, not having to switch and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I was just curious if you happen to know if they existed for whiteboards. That might be. And then one other thing, do you ever have meetings where you have an interactive whiteboard? Because it seems like this would really lend to that.
I have tried. I bought and still have around here somewhere the very first Wacom board that they ever made. So it was about that big. It's about that big, and it's wired, and I think it's got like a big. I think it's a VGA plug, and so I got a VGA plug that changes into a USB, and it comes with a stylus, and it still works. But I never got to a point where I could reconcile doing something down here while seeing it happen up here. And that's probably just old school shit. I need to see the line coming off the end of my pen.
Well, what
I need to feel the medium that I'm on. So I've tried using the sort of digital ones. Oh wait, no, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the white, the smart
The ones with the sensors.
Yes, but you use something, right? You use a marker.
Yeah.
Right on it, just like a whiteboard. They see, but then you can print it out or you can capture it digital.
Yeah. I also got to play around with one of the first ones of those too. And it's pretty cool, but it was also kind of a pain in the, if you were going around, if you were traveling with it.
Oh, okay. I'm talking fixed.
Well, I mean, it was meant to be portable. It kind of went into a case, but because it folded into this nice small case, you had to spend time assembling it. It was kind of like putting a pup tent up. Because you got a sensor up here that's got to stick to the wall. Hopefully it does. You got a sensor down here that's got to stick to the wall, and you've got the capture thing, that can print, and you can use regular old markers, but they have to sit in these cradles that had sensors that knew the color. Actually, I think the cradle had to be the right color for the pen.
Right. Yeah.
And so they were kind of big and bulky. And so I gave it a try. It was kind of cool from a novelty standpoint. But again, it was one of those things where I was having to pay so much attention to the specifics of what I was doing that I felt distracted from the things I normally would be listening to and wanting to pay attention to. Now, that could be eliminated with practice, but it just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, I was talking about using a dry erase marker on an interactive whiteboard, just like Paula's saying. So you still have that whiteboard, regular whiteboard. And now I'm not talking about the portable one where you fold up.
Yeah.
But when I was teaching, you could use your.
Are you talking about the ones on wheels?
Yes.
That you roll around like a rolling whiteboard? Yeah, I've used some of those too.
Okay.
And you can use your regular pen because basically the whole thing is a sensor.
Right.
And it can also determine color and things like that. So yeah, it's a lot closer to the traditional rolling whiteboard. I feel like I've done my best work where it's been on a wall where I can just go big long distances. Because ideas, stream of thought, I think I may have shown you a couple of pictures of some of the whiteboards I've worked on.
Yeah.
They really do go like,
yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
But that's all subjective. That's just all personal preference. So I'm I'm not knocking it. The same way I really don't knock anything that works for anybody. It really just comes down to what you have, like I said before, what you have a level of comfort with. And if you like something enough that you want to develop that comfort, then good on you.
Thank
So yeah,
you.
I can't say there were pros or cons about it, other than it's just wasn't my preference.
Well, thank you. I mean, you can take, this is inexpensive, so makes a lot of sense, but thank you.
You bet. Any other questions?
Hey, Adam, this is Kristen here. I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Great. Okay, cool. So my background, similar to you, my background is in storyboards. I have been drawing storyboards for TV commercials for about 15 years. And I then
Why are you
transitioned.
here?
Yeah. I transitioned into UX design a couple of years ago. But I'm currently at a company that uses a lot of complex data, a lot of heavy complex data. They do like enterprise software. It's super boring and complex. And it's like, I can't really wrap my brain around it. And, you know, I'm starting to kind of get into the facilitation space. And how do you, I don't know, like, how do you translate like complex data and enterprise software into simple sketches in a workshop? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's tough. And like everything that you were saying earlier, like I can totally, resonate with, like, kind of getting up in front of people can be scary, and like when I draw storyboards, I'm doing kind of detailed and wrinkles and shirts. And then this is like the complete opposite, not the complete opposite, but
and you're probably standing up in front of crusty old engineers and business process people who have been doing this forever, and they're kind of like grumpy old guys like me, so that just sort of adds the tension, because you're just sure that they are mentally throwing darts at everything you do. I've seen a couple different things that I have seen make a difference in communicating, let's say communicating information from data. There are some people, not many, but a couple folks that I know who have this incredible gift that's part about storytelling, and it's part about being able to look at and deeply understand what's going on in the spreadsheets and everything, and communicate that in human terms and a story. I'm not sure that's something you can develop. But what I do, because I don't have that capability, is I always look, and I've done a lot of enterprise projects. I kind of like them too, because they're always wicked problems. And by doing enterprise stuff, if you can find a way to improve things for the humans involved, there's almost something quantifiable, almost always something quantifiable that you can measure about that. That in enterprises, success of user experience is a little bit easier to capture and convey. Now, I guess what I'm saying is I look for whatever the human element is. Somewhere there's an operator in a call center.
Right.
Or somewhere there's a guy out in the oil patch using an iPad. Somewhere there are a couple of engineers looking at exploded versions of drill bits.
Right.
Which on the face of things is like watching grass grow for me. I mean, I glaze over right away. So I look again for not necessarily the specifics of what's going on from a from a deep business standpoint, because when you're doing enterprise software, you're dealing with the expert users. You're never going to be the expert user.
Mhm.
And so it's less about deeply understanding what they're doing than it is about deeply understanding them.
Mm.
What are their goals? Where's the pain coming from? What does life look like when it's good? And what does life look like when it's bad? And if it's bad, is there anything that could be done to mitigate that?
Mhm.
And it's not going to be the $3 million button that you see. I think it was maybe 10,000 when it started. Now I think it's up to $4 million button, where they did usability testing and they changed the color of the button and they generated, the next year over year revenue was like, 10,000%. It's kind of good to understand those mechanics, but it's not as important as understanding about how all these little things make a difference when they're aggregated. No one thing by itself is that big a deal. And that gets out of focus because when you're talking to people about features and functions, whatever feature and function you're talking about at that moment is the most important thing in the world, right? And you have about 25 conversations, and now you got a list of 25 of the most important things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, where you lend a hand is being able to step back and look at the whole picture and look at the aggregation and begin to help drive prioritization exercises. Hell, I even wrote a process for it, but it still works. And it was to keep from having to call my boss an idiot, frankly. It was a long time ago. Some really good advice that was given to me by a guy I still work with was to be the expert in what you're the expert in. I got a couple of business degrees. Even though I started out as an illustrator, I made a conscious decision that if I was, ever going to have any control over what I did, I had to better understand business because that's the grown-ups table.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I needed to be able to speak that language.
Yeah.
And that helps me a lot today. Because there's still a lot of sort of designing dilettantes out there who just like, why don't they see the value? Because they're not trained to. But by being aware of those dynamics and staying centered in your wheelhouse, and this is not about staying in your lane, it's about understanding the things that are adjacent to what you do enough to be literate, but not being an expert. And working with the people that are the experts so that everybody's expertise comes into play and it connects and it works together. Because if you do that, you're also demonstrating respect for everybody else. So the engineers don't treat you like a bad engineer, they treat you like a good designer.
Yeah. Okay.
So start with the things that we, that are our bread and butter. Who are the people that are affected?
Yeah.
What are we building? And how does it play a role in people's lives? And then let's look at that. See where the good things are and where the bad things are. Where are the opportunities? Where are, the magic moments that we can actually capitalize and make more magic? And magic moments are the same thing too. They're usually not one big firework blast. It's a combination of little kindnesses and courtesies and considerations. When somebody is using an app and, they did 6-7 things there that they didn't really notice at the time, not individually, but when they come out the other end, they think, wow, that wasn't nearly as painful as I thought it would be. They won't know why, because you don't ever remember the things that you do, but you remember how you felt about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Adam, I just wanted to point out time. We're at 12:35. I didn't know when you were planning.
Okay.
Breaks.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay.
I've only got a few little tidbits here. Let's get through those real quick, and then we'll take another break. And then we'll come back and do some even less structured stuff and have a little more fun. Handwriting. So we were talking about caps, but there's also labeling. And just like with shapes, you can show emotion or add a different sense of either urgency or emphasis, or something whimsical, or even villainous, just by the kinds of lines that you use. So when you're labeling things, and I don't suggest doing this for everything, just like in digital design, if you're doing like a presentation, you find one kind of nice ornamental font for the big titles and things like that, but you find something that's pretty easy to read and usually sans serif that is just simple to read to convey the information. So in terms of labeling things or annotating things, these are just three things that I sort of did off the top of my head. And so you have probably seen other fonts or ideas that you like better, and you can incorporate that. Yeah. It's dead simple, but it's a little stylized now. And by doing that, you've just added a little variety to the things that are going on up on the board. So kind of if you're in list land and you're writing everything the same way, put some cool labels on it. Or add some color in a few different places. So yeah, the same thing. And I'm not saying use these, but hey, if they light you up, go for it. Okay, this is a little more art schoolish because it kind of does take knowing how to keep these spaces. This is like anything else, practice it often enough. Capital S and small s is a pain in the ass. You always make the top bigger than the bottom accidentally. Oh, nobody's getting seasick from this. So you get the idea, right? If you want to dig a little deeper into that, look into, well, if you read that article from Dave Gray about sketching notes, there's also the practice of sketch noting. And I've seen lots of it done, and even the not so great ones are still pretty good. Probably the best person I know at this is, God, I can't believe I forgot her name. Shit, I'll have to remember later. But I see her at a lot of events, and they set her up a nice table, and she's got big collection of pens and things that she likes to use. And of course has beautiful handwriting, and she has very nice paper laid out, and she takes the key notes from the presentation. So the big quotable bits and topics, maybe does a little quick head sketch of the person speaking, and sort of creates this skeleton, sort of a wireframe of the basic information. And just like the apple, she's taking the information from what's coming to her And then when she's done, she breaks out a handful of, sort of pastel kind of watercolor pens, and then goes back and just does little minor things to emphasize different things along that. So she has to go back and do that after she's done. And she just delivers some brilliant sketch notes. God, I can't believe I can't remember her name. She'd kill me. Okay. But that's a thing. That's something you can kind of dig into. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here is, you could just write one dot a lowercase a and do an outline. But even a spreadsheet lets you drop a little style in there, alternating background colors on the lines, a style guide basically for different layouts of spreadsheets. So not much different.
Adam, we have a question. Dana, you want to go ahead and ask Adam your question?
Dana, you were getting on my last nerve.
I know. Good thing we're friends.
I know. I'm glad we are.
Someone,
You
I
get
just
really
wanted to
pissed
point,
for me saying that.
I just wanted to point out, Rahul asked if it was Jessica Heish. Is that who you're talking about? Or?
No. Okay, you're gonna make me find out now.
That's okay. I just was wondering. I just want to.
Well, but
stories.
I'm obsessive compulsive enough that it's gonna fuck
Let's
me.
try to find that later, Adam. That's okay.
All right. BJ. Shit. Okay. So a few other little things here and yon. Another fun thing to use, again, just to add a little interest to what you may be doing on a screen, is angles. So if you looked at my deck, like the books, none of them were straight up and down. Sometimes it adds sort of a look maybe of disarray, like a bunch of cards or photos out on a desk. These are kind of extreme angles, but so, you could have them sort of lined up in a row, which, fine for digital things, or maybe when you're organizing things in, say, a carousel set or something like that, but where you have an opportunity to be just a little random for no other reason, because it adds just a little interest to what people are looking at. So the little arabesques you might draw in the corner if you're doing sketch notes or other things like that, just whatever you like. Emojis. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about something that starts to kind of smell like a system. And this is not a hard and fast rule for anybody. Where'd it go? There it is. And this is just based on the fact that more often than not, when you buy a set of whiteboard markers, they usually come in these 4 colors. They don't have to, but some of you are probably more familiar with these quartet markers. And for a long time, I was real snob about these things. I just thought they had better coverage, thicker line, didn't bleed as much. And so I was kind of picky about them. I used to buy my own all the time, even though later on my office caught up and they started buying only those because I hated expo markers. You know, those ones you see everywhere, right? These, on the other hand, are a little picky in that they're refillable. And they're a little pricier, but you can buy refills. So when this thing runs out, pop that off, stick another one on, I'm back in business. They got a nice chiseled end. Ink coverage is great. A little thicker, which is, you know, kind of a nice feeling for me in my hand. But they might light you up. Whereas, you know, these, a little bit harder to erase, but, you know, they're fine line, which works pretty good for some of this close end stuff. Anyway, when you're doing interaction design, there are, and again, this is not any formal notation, but it's just sort of what I picked up and collected over the years, different things that people would do to show certain dynamics. So one example, so if I'm drawing a mobile app page, so I got a header and I got my stuff. And then maybe as you scroll down, it reaches a point where it's just repetitive. So maybe it's a catalog or a set of, you know, any series of things. What you can do is something like this. And you can hash that too if you like. You don't have to. To demonstrate that what you're seeing here is just repeated down here. And so if any of you, you know, worked on app screens and stuff like that, or website screens, you know, they can get pretty scrolly. So, and you wind up having designs and things that if you can see the whole thing, you can't read any of it. So you got to zoom way in. But that's one demonstration. And the red is here because in this system, red is designed to show what's the best term for it? What was I doing? Okay, if I'd have done this right, I'd have put it in blue because in this system, each of these four colors means something. Blue is annotation. So in this case, we're using blue to demonstrate something that isn't actually going to be on the screen, but shows you that there is essentially a breakpoint here, and there's no need to continue all this because it's all the same as this. And you could do the thing pretty much the same way on the other end, because let's say it's continuous all the way down to where you have your nav bar or your fab. That was just my phone. And so going up, God, I'm just flinging stuff around here.
Hey, Adam,
Yeah.
when you get to a breaking point, Christina has a question for you.
Okay. Well, I think you can see where I'm going with this. Essentially, it's the same thing upside down.
Is it okay for me to ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So just getting some clarification around the screen drawing that you're doing, the line, like the pulse line that you're drawing.
Yeah.
What exactly does it reference? Like if you're sketching out a wireframe of like, this is generally what it's going to look like, then what falls below that pulse line?
What you're saying is that what you see right here is just repeating.
Oh, so it's like more of the screen, or like you're scrolling and there's other stuff there that's not important to this.
Well, not important because only because you can see this and you can see this, and everything else below that is just another version of that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which
So,
kind of
okay,
brings up,
that's a good question. I wasn't sure about that either, Christina. So it's like repeat, right? So if
Yeah.
it was like cards that all have the same
yeah,
kind of
everything below
content.
this line is
Ah.
just repeated.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
And sort of along those same lines, you know, there's a lot of sort of different ways to show what's essentially an ellipsis. You know, the 3 dots. And so if I'm drawing, say, an app map, and, you know, we've gotten through the primary navigation and we've gotten through the secondary navigation, and you've chosen your particular path, especially on an e-commerce site where they have a whole catalog of stuff, right? But the format is the same for every product. So there's a little card that has certain bits of information on it that are there for you to scan, so that if you're looking at a list, you can, based on particular metadata, you can pick out the one that you're looking for. And then you tap that and you get to a detail screen, which has a bigger picture, maybe a set of pictures. You know, everybody's used Amazon, right? You know, details, prices, and the page layout, even though it's kind of crowded and complex, is the same every time. You know where to look for everything when you get there, right? So I don't need to draw a page for every item in the catalog. What I can do is this, just to represent that there are more pages, just like this one. I'm getting concerned because I can't find my pen lid and I don't want it to dry out. Damn it. I'm sure I'll find it as soon as I'm not looking for it. Okay, fingers crossed.
It's always the way, isn't it?
Right. So, like I said, blue for annotation. Now, green, I try to use for movement. So let's say that I am drawing an app screen, and there's a transition where the page flips. And so I want to communicate that. And the way I'm going to do it is by doing this. And then you see how I always make a white space, but instead of drawing over lines with a white marker, with a whiteboard marker? It's a good habit to get into. Otherwise, you screw up the colors in your whiteboard markers. So by using this arrow and this shared view of the page, I'm showing that this would be annotation. I may also do God, that's terrible. show a gesture of swiping this way that causes the page to flip. So this is the movement, and this is the annotation. I screwed it up again. The hand should be red because that's gestures. As you can see, I don't exactly adhere to this system.
So
Well,
Adam, when you're saying colors, where's that coming from?
So most of, like I said, most of the time when you buy a bunch of whiteboard markers, you get red, black, blue, and green, right?
Uh-huh.
And because that's so common, this is a system that one of the people I worked with came up with to add a little consistency to how we did notation on our whiteboards so that anybody looking
So is it like
know the
just a
difference
team,
between,
team? Is it like a team norm that you've kind of established?
It never really got etched in stone, but those of us who paid attention to it kind of tried to.
Okay.
As you can see, I never really did. And every time I try to, I forget and start getting chocolate in my peanut butter. Right. And so if I wanted to say anything about this, I wanted to provide information, I might do a call out like that. That's the annotation pin. Gestures, annotation, movement, or I should say movement on the screen, element movement, and then your baseline for screens and any other elements that you're applying this to. So, kind of handy. And we talked about subtraction. So yeah, the last thing I want to show you is not even really.
Just wanted to do a quick time check, Adam.
This is the last thing.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
So this isn't necessarily about sketching per se, although it's sketching is one way to do it. When somebody would start on a new project, whoever the strategist was who was trying to come up with some of the initial concepts might reach out to anybody who's got a little time on their hands. And so you might find 2 or 3 people and you go find a whiteboard somewhere and we're given whoever's running the thing is just, and this is, like I said, it's like a drive-by, just some people gather up against a wall. They have something they need to do for a particular client or for a particular feature or function. And so anybody who writes or anybody who's done, you know, any kind of artwork, that is your worst enemy, right? The big blank empty screen. And this is a trick I got from another colleague of mine. And what the first thing he would do is he would draw a set of empty screens. I usually, when I do this, I don't put a bottom on it because I never know how far down it's going to go. It's kind of like the same thing, write it first and then put a box around it. Well, you got to kind of start with the box. And then what he would do is just start putting random shit in the squares. You might do this or this. Or this. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just whatever comes out of your head and comes out the end of your pen. So, you know, you just start playing with patterns that, you know, might mean something or don't. And he would just sort of keep doing that, thinking about what he was trying to come up with, and just using this as sort of a mindless way to get started. And so while you're thinking about it and you're doing these different shapes and little patterns. Every time you do something like this, you're not just seeing these two little squiggles here. You're not just seeing these 6 dots on a line. You're not just seeing this little shape or this. This makes me think of a beer label. This makes me think of a river. This makes me think either of a domino or the banner that the 7 Samurai used in a Kurosawa film. So there's some of my geek cred. This makes me think about a Viking ship. So I wasn't thinking about any of those things when I drew these. I'm just making marks on the screen. And I just thought this was a brilliant way to start from nothing, flat-footed. You haven't been given any thought up to this point, but you have an end result you need to try to get to. And so how do you kickstart that when you just look at a big blank wall? And so whether you're sketching on paper or sketching on a whiteboard or doing stuff on Miro, you might just put a bunch of blank frames up there and start dropping shapes on them or dropping stickies with ideas or a combination of all those things. And it doesn't have to be directed or anything. I'm just making motions with my hand, right? But because we see patterns and because we always compare what we see to things we know, these little random things, if you stop and you go back and you look at them, you say, okay, what does that make you think of? Just like looking at clouds. What do you see there? I see a bunny. So this is just mindless. It's the second pass that you begin to tell yourself what these things look like. And as you're doing that, you're starting to draw, like we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, you're beginning to draw lines between the things you're seeing and the things you already know. And so innovation is just like fishing. You wouldn't know it when you talk to some business people, but the innovation process is the same as the creative process. You can't guarantee you're going to come up with something every time, just like fishing. But you can hedge your bets. You can have the right boat. You can have the right bait. You can have the right, the right fishing spot, and put those things together, and you improve your chances. So when it comes to trying to come up with creative ideas, there are also things you can do to improve your chances. Find a space where you can work, for one thing. Get some other people around, start banging ideas back and forth. Do something like this, just to start getting shapes out there that begin to look like things to you, that you'll begin to start connecting to the thing you need to do, or something else that maybe creates a path to do the thing you need to do. If you've ever been in advertising or anything like that, this, that's what you get all the time. So there's no guarantee you're going to come up with something brand new, but you can like I said, you can set yourself up so that you're in a place where a lot of ideas are flying around. Things you're doing, things that are in front of you, things that people are saying, things you saw recently, hunches you've walked around with for 20 years. And by putting yourself in a place where all that stuff gets to fly around together, from time to time, a couple of those things are going to bang into each other. And when they do, and you think, that's kind of interesting. If you can draw a real quick sketch of it, and this is exactly what I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, you draw a real quick sketch of it just to kind of capture the idea. Because it's when you come back that you can look at that, and you may have gone off and done other things and totally forgotten about it. But when you come back, you've left enough there behind so that you can take it, pick it up again, and start to look at it. Can y'all see me on camera, or just my board?
Yeah, we can see you too, Adam.
Okay, because I've been gesturing to the camera this whole time, and I think,
Yep.
is it, you can see us?
Yep.
So you can pick an idea up, begin to look at it and look around it and start to think, okay, well, is there something going on here? Innovation by definition is, and I got this out of business school, is new combinations. That's kind of anticlimactic given all the, the bloviation and buzz that goes into the wonderfulness of innovation. The truth is, innovation is a neutral term. It just means that two things got combined. Whether it's good or not is what you figure out when you capture the, I had the presence of mind to capture the idea so that you could go back and think about it later. Eureka moments don't happen very often. In fact, one of the examples of a eureka moment that is in a book by Stephen Johnson about where ideas come from isn't really a eureka moment. That's another little story, but it has to do with creating air conditioners because a guy got an idea looking at steam fog going over railroad tracks about how the condenser coil might work, and that's what he invented. But he was also an engineer. He'd spent a lot of time in engineering school, so he was kind of uniquely suited to make that observation. So the combination was what he saw with what he understood about physics. Just like a couple things bang together in your brain and you think, that's worth a later look. And you go back and you look at it, you say, yeah, I don't know. Probably not a market for pizza scented hand cream. And that's fine. Toss it out. You haven't invested a hell of a lot in it. But every once in a while, you're going to come across something that says, you know what? Let's go ahead and tease this one out a little more. Let's see if we can get some legs under it and see where we go with it. Because when you're doing this, it's all about quantity. When you're making business decisions about something that is innovative, there's some form of the same equation you're going to put to it every time. And that is, how much will it cost to do, or how much effort will it take, and how much value comes out of it. And so if the cost is low and the value is high, yeah, let's invest in some more of this. And we can be a little riskier with it because the cost is low. That's why sketching is cost effective, because there's no cost in wiping it away or changing it or turning it into something else or just getting rid of it. It's a whole lot more expensive when you're down writing code and you have a finished design system and you've got a bunch of pages written and then somebody figures out some fundamental thing is not there because the question didn't get asked. And so I guess the way I'll just wrap this up is I'm very fond of something that Frank Lloyd Wright used to say when he was talking to clients and he was trying to ask and answer questions when things were still a drawing. He would say, well, and I'm probably paraphrasing, well, I can get out a pencil and fix it now, or I can get a sledgehammer and fix it later. So between that and knowing that all you're really trying to do is create understanding, I hope there are some nuggets you've been able to put in your pocket today. Maybe even a few little, reference points that, today you're just sort of taking it in, making sense of it. Later on, you'll digest and, certain things will stick and some things won't. And you'll have a way to go back and look and remember what that was about and maybe take it out for a run. So best of luck to all of you on that. Thank you.
Cool.
So let's take another break. And when you come back, we're going to play a little game. And as I said before, this is a game with no clock, no competition, no teams being chosen up. It is I got a little app on my phone that is a random word generator. And it's essentially for playing Pictionary. It's just off-brand. So it's got multiple levels. And so we'll start out, probably not with the dead easiest, maybe we will, but dog, house, cat, shit, we've drawn most of that already. So I may start on up a higher level, and everybody, when we're back on everybody seeing each other in Zoom, I will send you a message with a word in it. And then you need to draw it and hold it up for everybody to see and see if we can guess what it is. And if we can't, maybe you'll want to embellish it a little bit more until we can figure out what it is, or maybe we can't. And then we can talk a little bit about why we can't. And it's just a broad discussion. Nobody's being put on the spot. And as I said before, if the idea of sharing something that you've drawn is, you know, just, you can't even, send me a little private chat message and I will not call on you for that. But I would ask that, okay, that I'll pull this down a little bit. My teleprompter hangs a little over the
So
screen.
Adam, do you want us to break? And
Yeah, so the last thing I was going to say is, even if you're thinking this really isn't for you, as far as doing something and holding it up for everybody to see, remember that nobody's trying to punch holes in it. Everybody wants you to succeed. So this is a safe place. This is a good group where we can have some fun with this. But if you just can't do it, let me know and I will not call on you. But hang on for just a little while, 2 or 3, before you send me that note. And if for some reason I call on you before you're ready, just say, I'm not ready. And maybe I'll get you in later if you don't send me a note, or you send me a note and I won't pester you about it. So everybody's going to get draw some, everybody's going to show, we're all going to get to talk about it. And it doesn't have to be do. We can go off on tangents. That's the fun part. So 15 minutes. I'm probably going to go stuff some food in my cake hole and we'll get back together. And I'm going to watch the time this time. And we'll play some games.
sounds
Thanks.
good. All right, everybody get back at 27 after the hour for whatever time zone that you're in. And we'll see you soon.
So,
Do you want cameras on, Adam, or
yes,
what's everybody ready to turn your cameras on?
camera's
Okay.
on.
This is a
Unless you just, if you
group
just really
activity.
don't want to do it, you don't have to. Like I said, this is not supposed to be a pressure cooker of any kind. So the way this works is, you know, everybody is not necessarily in the same order on their screens as everybody else. So what I'm probably going to do is just start with, I'm in the second spot up top because that's where speakers usually wind up. So whoever's next to me, I am going to send you, if I can get rid of this dialog box, I'm going to send you a word. And I want you to try to draw the word. That shouldn't be hard. And then show us your drawing. And we're going to see if we can't guess what it is. And if you want to continue to add little things and change it, if you think you can kind of help steer us to the right answer, if it doesn't jump out right away, and a lot of times it usually does. Sometimes it won't. It's usually for the same reason. So we'll see that too. So guess who's sitting to my right? Rachel? You okay starting us off?
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
Thanks.
So you're okay being the first one?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to send you a word.
So I'm wondering, Adam, while she's doing that, will you be sending the words to everybody? A different word to everyone, or how have we?
Everybody, I'm going to send a direct message with the word to everybody, meaning one at a time.
Got it. And then we're all going to sketch at the same time.
You can. No. Only one person sketching. because y'all have to guess what the word is from what she sketches. And so everybody gets their own word, and we'll go around the room. So Rachel, here is, okay. Here's your word. So think about the building blocks. Think about the fact that don't overthink it. Just bang it out there. Somebody's got their hand up. Then it was up.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
All right. I was just wondering, do we put our answer in the chat or do we just kind of yell it out like in Pictionary?
You can yell it out
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Let's yell
or
it
put
out.
your hand up or something like that. Like I said, there's no prize for getting it right. The objective here is to just see if you can scribble something out and other people can understand it. That's the win. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I can see it. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
Any guesses? Just throw them right out there.
Water in a glass, but a broken glass.
Can you spotlight her? I can't see her.
A ditch?
What you can do is I think you can right click and pin her. Can you see her now?
Candy bar?
Oh, okay.
Rachel, you get to
A
decide.
river? It's not a
Some,
river.
close
some
with
kind of
that.
liquid
Candy bar.
candy bar. Oh,
I got it.
Yay.
What was your word, Rachel?
Oh, I could be more specific with drawing it because I kind of want to go through and
Okay.
Okay, yeah, take as much time as you want on these. The clock's not ticking on you. Or is it? We go to 2 or 2:30?
We go to 2, so we have about 20 minutes left. So I don't know, Adam, if we want to we could circle back to Rachel. We could give another prompt to somebody
Well, I can go ahead. I can go ahead and just send out prompts to everybody.
Yeah, we could all kind of
Everybody gets their own prompt. Everybody gets to sketch, and then
Yeah.
we'll go around and.
I like that. Let's do that.
All right, let's do that. So. Nothing is in a convenient place right now. Lisa, that's yours. Paula, there's yours. There's yours, Jen.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I might at first think it's a pill pack,
oh, really,
like a blister pack.
like I was trying to
Chocolate?
A game
Yeah.
on app
Chocolate.
game? I can't see it.
bar of chocolate.
Okay, Kristen, here comes yours. This app has many settings, and we're on the low medium setting. And so if everybody bangs through these, if there's time, we might take another round. Okay, who's next?
If you have your draw, if Adam has given you your prompt and you have your drawing, raise your hand and we'll shift the conversation to you so we can guess on yours. Rachel, did we guess yours then? What was it?
I think
Candy
we
bar?
did.
It was chocolate.
Oh, chocolate.
Or
Okay,
bar, yeah.
cool. Thanks for taking the first stab. I can go. Mine was, Adam, are you still passing them out?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I am just tapping it. I'm taking the next word and I'm throwing it out there. I am not aiming these or trying to be precious or cute. So
All right.
somebody got a
ahead.
word who's going to understand what I mean by that. Let's
Can
see.
you all see mine? Any guesses?
Breast cancer ribbon?
Breast cancer, yeah, cancer.
A what?
Breast cancer ribbon?
It is ribbon.
Where
Well done. Not breast cancer specifically, but it is ribbon. So I had an easy one. So thanks, Adam, for that.
Well, they're all.
Where
none of them really hurt.
ribbon?
Christina, did you get
Oh,
yours?
I get it. It's just ribbon. Okay.
No, I didn't get one yet.
Okay, you're next.
I can go next if everyone's
Okay, Rahul. Yeah. 1 second.
Mail?
I'm still
Mailbox.
Yeah, yes, correct. Yeah, that's it.
Nice one.
Can you 1 second, Rahul? Can you?
Sure.
I want to. Ooh, it's not. Can you say something so it'll go to you?
Oh, sorry, yes. This
we
is a
go.
mailbox.
Thanks.
sending a letter.
It's just a mailbox, and I just wanted to show that letters go in there.
It's good. I love it.
Oh,
Anybody else have a all right, Paula, let me pin yours so
Sibling.
that I can.
Or kid or daughter.
Girl.
Girl. Yeah.
Sister.
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 oh,
Cool.
okay. Oh, gee. Can you put it back up? I didn't see it for some. Okay. I've got to. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I liked how you took Adam's recommendation of putting the nose on there.
Karen, disregard the second one.
All right. Who's got one? Raise your hand if you're ready to share for us to guess. Your virtual hand, because I don't see everybody. All right, Austin. I'm going to pin you up so I can. All right.
Baguette. Cutting board. Cutting board.
Cucumber?
Baguette.
Cucumber. Yeah.
Cucumber?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, it was a cucumber.
It had the arrow. That was a good one. Oh, I
all
got it
right.
finally.
Anybody?
Okay, that's everybody.
All right.
Ashley
I
has
can
her
go
hand up.
next. I don't know if you can see this.
Okay, just 1 second.
Ferris wheel.
Yep.
Hey,
That's a very cool thing you got there. What is that? It's
show
like
it, Ashley. Hold it up again. Your tool,
It's on
right?
it's on Amazon. Tony Dossett, Dosat, he recommended on Instagram. It's like a little glass whiteboard.
Oh, awesome.
I did give him a shout out at one point during this, didn't I?
I can't remember,
I don't remember.
but we got it there now.
What is the whiteboard called?
Well, when I was talking about journey maps, and it may have been a sidebar, but I've got a process of doing journey maps that evolved from sort of straight line paths and empathy maps, like Dave Gray does, with the big head in the middle and the different quadrants for speaking and saying and hearing and thinking and feeling and all that. Tony mashed them up and basically put them on a grid. So down one side, you had the different, emotions or actions or senses involved. And across the top, you have your straight line path. So let's say it's a drive-in restaurant. So from awareness all the way through to eating and being happy. And they're pretty specific steps. But wherever two of those things intersect, you get everybody who's working on that particular thing to put stickies up there about what the person is seeing. And then you go down to hearing. What are they seeing or hearing in that moment? And what are they thinking and feeling in that moment? And that was brilliant. And we did that in that very first discovery that we did when the lockdown started. And when I was playing with it, I was just trying to look at how do I distill this? And even though we're looking at people's emotions, we're not really kind of bringing it down to anything. And so I created another scale down on the bottom with faces that are all the way from really happy to really panicked. And there's about 18 little faces in between that show those emotions. And so you look at the box in the path and you look all the way down, hearing, seeing, thinking, feeling, and everything. And you derive essentially what you think that person's emotion is in that moment. And you put that little face right under there. And so you put little faces all up and down based on where you think their emotional state is. And you get a little, cardiac line. And then you go ahead and add additional annotations such as thought bubbles or other contacts, like if they're talking to a person or using a phone or a tablet or filling out paperwork or in the car or on a gurney or things like that to sort of show the movement. So you've got a story that begins at one point, and this is this particular person's journey. And you can also do more than one person, more than one persona on that same layout. And so that was my contribution to it. But Tony's first mashup of that, my part just seemed sort of like a logical conclusion, but I never got there if Tony hadn't had that first idea.
Cool.
He and
looks like-
I work together.
Yeah. All right. Looks like Dana has her hand up. We'll let her go next and share
Okay.
her drawing. And all of us can take a guess.
Toothbrush.
Toothbrush.
Bristles.
No, toothbrush. She got it. At the
Got it in
Hold it up.
one.
First one who said it was toothbrush. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very good.
Who
All right.
else still has to go?
Hamida, how are you? Good to see you. Give me
Prism.
1 second. Let me pin that. So I can
Base.
see.
Diamond.
Autumn.
Base.
Somebody said it. Yes,
Foundation.
it's base.
Face.
Okay.
Wow. That's a tough one. Well done.
I thought that was a little abstract. That could go a lot
Yeah.
of different ways.
Exactly. Who else hasn't gone yet? I see Karen.
Christina's got her hand up.
Oh.
Oh wait, we're looking at one.
Okay.
Garbage.
Trash.
Waste. Trash. Yep.
Yeah.
Paper
got it.
balls.
Garbage is the right word.
Okay, awesome.
Wait a minute. I was like, just 1 second. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Christina. Kind of blurry.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on.
I think it's your filter.
Oh, yeah, hang on. Let me turn off my background filter. Somebody else can go in the meantime.
Is anybody else gone? Anybody else not gone?
Karen, did you draw one? Do you have something to share?
Yes.
Clock.
Time.
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 Alarm.
Very
Timer.
close.
Timer.
Someone said timer?
Oh,
Yeah, that's timer. Yeah.
Timer. Ah.
Remember I said there were no timers in this exercise? I lied.
Oh, timer. Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Ticket.
Yeah,
Movie ticket.
it's just
Wait.
ticket.
Can you hold it up again, please? Excellent. Thank you. All right, did we get everybody? John,
Don, did you go?
no. Say something, John, so it'll make you be my main screen.
Rocket? No.
Hello.
The
John,
I
can
don't
you
know.
say?
Switch.
No,
Lawn chair?
no, something.
No, switch. Switch was right.
Okay.
Oh, switch.
Okay, there you go.
Wait, sorry, John, can you hold it up one more time?
Yeah, if you say something, then the big screen focuses on you so we can all see it better.
Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
awesome, we got it. Did everyone go? VR went, right? You went, right? Didn't you? VR? Yours was.
Yes, I did.
Yours was garbage, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Kristen go?
Hey, I did not go.
Okay.
Oh, atoms, molecules.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's molecules. Yeah.
Wait, hold it up again.
That was an easy
Oh,
one.
sorry.
Can you say it again? Say something so it'll.
Oh, hello. Am I in the main?
There you go.
Got
Yep.
it. Thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. Yay,
Yep.
that was fun.
Cool. So how long did that take?
Total? Oh,
2
what was it about?
seconds. Oh.
You mean to sketch it or all the rounds?
Well, by the time we started mass producing words.
It was about 15 minutes, I think.
Okay, well, we've only got 9. So this app, excuse me, is called Game Words. And it actually provides words for lots of different games. So Pictionary, charades, catchphrase, get to know you, things like that. I use the Pictionary part that starts with easy, easy 2, medium, medium 2, and goes up to progressively harder, which is another way of saying progressively abstract. And so the way it works, if we had time, I was going to do another medium thing. Let's see.
It's just white right now. I
Yeah,
can't
hang
really
on.
see it, Adam.
Me.
While Adam's getting that set, I have a request. If you feel comfortable, take a picture of your sketch, share it on social media, LinkedIn, with your photo in it or not, and then tag UX Research Strat. If you're on LinkedIn, go ahead and tag the group. Tag Adam too. We'd love to have you share your drawings with the world.
So just real quick, let me show you this app.
I stepped away for a second. Can I share mine?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Please. Adam, I think you guys stopped sharing your screen.
Oh,
Because you got your sketchy hand.
sorry.
Thanks for coming back and
Yeah, of
letting us
course.
know.
It's
Oh, you'll have to turn off your blur.
Yeah.
I should have known that too. Let's see.
There we
All right,
go.
there you go.
Oh,
Okay.
Kitchen?
That's
Kitchen.
it.
That was
Kitchen.
a good one.
Wow, that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So we don't have time to do another round, but just I got a couple questions for you. First of all, I don't know what skills or background anybody came in with.
Uh-oh.
Can we, where
I
did he
think
go?
he lost. He dropped the
Uh-oh.
call.
Adam,
Cliffhanger.
where are you?
Oh, that's a first.
I hope
How
they
fun.
use total connection. Okay. Maybe call or text.
I'm gonna have to get my nieces and nephews to play Pictionary with me now on Zoom. Yeah.
Do you want me to text him or are you texting him, Jen?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I texted him.
Gee, I can't hear. I'm sorry.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, that was fun. And it was interesting how some, I mean, some were pretty easy. And so, the concept, like Hamida's of the base, right? Like that could have been, you know, you could have drawn like a baseball diamond and
Oh,
and, and sh- shown the base that way. Um, and I'm not
Sorry,
hearing.
I
Here he is.
I hit the wrong button.
I have done that. I know.
Okay, you've disabled participant screen sharing.
I got you. Just a sec. You were asking, Adam, you were asking what everybody's experience was coming into the workshop.
Yeah. I mean, did anybody, like I said, I don't know what you came in with. So was anybody able to sort of latch on to some of this stuff and do something they didn't think they could do before?
100%.
Cool. That's kind of the point of the thing. So I'm glad. So let me show you all this real quick so you can download it yourself because it's a good practice tool. Let's see. So brighten it up. There we go.
There we go.
Name of the app again is called what?
It's called Game Words. And so they basically supply words for lots of games like charades or anything like that. So I used the Pictionary game, and we started out using Easy 2. And, you know, it's probably one reason everybody got it, but they also got it because they could tell right away what you had. So that's a win. I can press a level, and then all I have to do is tap, and I get a word. You tap, I get another word. And so, as you can see, when you get up into medium, things start to become a little bit more abstract. They're not quite, you know, people, places, or things. If we go into hard 2, critique, volume. So again, now these are a little bit more abstract, which makes them a little bit harder to communicate. So I'll share one thing that occurred when I did this before in Canada. Let me turn off my screen share. People who got words that were not very specific, you know, there isn't an object you can draw to communicate it, tried drawing context. The problem with that is they can't tell you what they're doing, so they're just drawing. And the more contextual things they drew, everybody thought that was what the thing was. And so it became harder and harder to get enough things on there that people could all put together to understand the concept. And so the more things they tried to do to conceptualize, the further off everybody got. So sketching is almost like, is pretty much like writing. There's not a big difference between the two in terms of the benefits of being succinct, which I will wrestle with for the rest of my life, I'm pretty sure. And I admire people that are. It's the same with sketching. If you do it enough, you get where you can deconstruct just about anything you look at into these basic shapes and that alphabet, and you can connect enough of those shapes to give you scaffolding that you can then sort of elaborate on a little bit to get something more specific. That doesn't make abstract concepts any better, but the least you can do to communicate the idea is the best way to do it, because there's a potential for signal to noise issues. So yeah, I mean, if this lit you up, if this is something you think you'd like to build up on, get this app and just like stand for a minute or two a day or do deep breathing, draw a couple words for 2 or 3 minutes or longer if you like. If you want to draw people, get that app Grimace. God, there's no reason to now. There's no reason not to now. It's 99 cents. That's just fun to play with. But I've used it as a reference.
Excellent. Does anybody have any wrap-up questions for Adam before we call it a day?
I have one. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you were saying abstract concept. Some of us have. I was just curious how you would have done it versus us.
So, okay, so just thinking about the words I was just looking at, drizzle, for instance. It's a noun and it's a verb. So I think what I would probably do is start with it is a thing. So I would start with the thing first and then let everybody look at it and get it wrong and then add the context. Like a car outside or somebody walking in it and, holding up their hand and things like that until, hopefully people start, probably start out with things like rain, squids, whatever. Anybody here watch Watchmen? But well, let's pull up a couple here. Let's see. Okay.
Anybody else? Anybody think of any other questions while Adam's pulling that app up or pulling up his topic? Again, just a reminder that you'll be getting an email with a link to how to get access to this recording. And it will be the same email that you use to register on Eventbrite. That is what you'll need to use to access the video on Vimeo. So if you registered on Eventbrite with a Gmail, that is what you'll need to log into Vimeo to be able to view. And you should just click on the links and it might say like purchase now, but you won't have to. It just applies the code automatically. So just so you know.
So I got fertilizer.
That's a fun one.
And of course, while you were talking, I actually had time to think about it. So I think I would draw either a box or a bunch of plants with the back end of a cow, fertilizing them.
I love it. That's funny. Looks like Rachel has a question.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Adam, for having this session. This is really great, and I'm looking forward to practicing my skills. But I was actually curious if the more we practice with this kind of like doing lettering and doing sketching, I'm wondering if you've seen handwriting improve with either yourself or with other coworkers you've had at Bottle Rocket, because I've had feedback happen from my portfolio is full of sketches and just ways where I just kind of annotate and write notes from like doing sketching out ideas and collaborating with people where I'll show my whole process, and a lot of it has a lot of those sketches and annotations. And a lot of other UX designers have led feedback saying like, oh, my handwriting looks like chicken shit and nobody's going to really like the fact that I have can't read my handwriting. And so I'm wondering if it just takes practice to kind of have better your handwriting, because I kind of do have steps where I can like get rid of some of the handwritten stuff and kind of do more of the kind of like sans serif annotations too, to kind of just brush up things. But I'm curious if you ever seen handwriting improve once you actually do these practices.
Yeah, actually. So I have a bit of a tremor now. Mine was associated with a medication, but it's still a little bit there. But at one point when I was getting ready to start working on this and I was trying to draw some new sketches, I couldn't do it. I tried to draw just, my little rocket trike. I tried to draw the top of that, and it was all over the place. And I'd have been fine, you know, if it were recognizable as something, but I couldn't even make the shape. And so I started looking at and digging into some things and talking to my doctors, because I said, I got to do a workshop Saturday. And if I can't draw, I can't do the workshop. It's kind of what I do for a living. So yeah, we got sorted out. If anybody's really interested, I dropped escitalopram. Or what is it? Can't remember its brand name. So yeah, the writing definitely improves, because if you can get practiced enough with the sketching part, and then I don't know how much it would help, but again, there's better legibility. Like I said, better legibility that comes with all caps, block letters. So that might be something to try to shift towards. And depending on how you're showing stuff, if that doesn't solve the problem for you, then I would find a way to just create some kind of machine-based thing, either a label maker, if it's on physical work. But if it's in a digital state, I would just find a way to drop comments on there and type them in. Everybody's got a different set of dice to roll when they do this stuff, and everybody's got to contend with some different things. And the nice thing about it is there's just tons of ways to get to the same place. And so it's a matter of finding the ones that you know work for you when you have very specific physical difficulty, or just the things that feel most comfortable to you. Does that help?
Cool. Maybe one more question, if anybody has one more.
I have one. Do you have any other recommendations for learning, like graphic facilitation or anything like that? Like any other workshops or other people that?
So I can recommend 2 books right away. Let's see. There's a book called Meeting Design by Kevin Hoffman. It came out about 2 years ago. And while it talks about a lot of the logistics and setting up meetings and things like that, it does talk about facilitation, not specifically visual, but there's a little bit of that in there. And that's a good place to start. And then one that is, there are a lot specifically about graphic facilitation or visual facilitation. There is one, however, that I like. Let me pull it up. Almost put it in the presentation, but there it is. It's called The Graphic Facilitator's Guide by Brandy Augerbeck. That's Agerbeck.
Yeah, she's based in Chicago. I'm in Chicago. I thought she's based in Chicago, and I've definitely looked her up. Her workshops, I mean, she's pricey. Her workshops are expensive.
That's why I bought a book.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll look at the book.
And there's another book that is sort of, it's tacitly graphic facilitation. And it's another Dave Gray book, and it's called Game Storming by Dave Gray, Gray. And it's a catalog of exercises and games. And they're organized based on particular outcomes or particular dynamics that you either have to incorporate or that you're trying to work towards. And some of them are only as different in that they're designed for a particular type of person. So if you got like a bunch of execs, A types in the room, you might do one. Whereas if you're, working with the people down on the factory floor, you may do something different. But every time I set up a discovery, I basically roll that out like a like the Sears catalog, and I pick the games I want. And sometimes I do them exactly as they are, and sometimes I'll adjust them a little bit, because there's always a lot of variables when you're trying to make these decisions. And a lot of them involve whiteboards and sketching and flip charts and things like that. So.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for giving us a good part of your day. I appreciate it. I did put drop it in the chat again one more time really quickly. Our post-event survey, your feedback is really valuable to us. So please take a moment to fill this quick survey out. Let us know what you thought of the workshop today. And again, keep an eye out for a follow-up email that will give you the link to this recording. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks again. See you later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
In the meantime, I'll drop a couple more things into the deck, and I'll make the deck available too.
That'd be
Awesome. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Great.
Amazing.
Bye.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.